You guys are alive, I can tell. Did you guys have a good time last night at Firestone Walker? Good time at Shay J? No, no one had a good time? It was a painful time for a lot of us, so let's just move on. We're going to have one more party tonight, if you can make it. We're doing it here at the hotel with the Beer Institute, with beers from Anheuser-Busch, so stick around once we're all done with tonight. And a huge thank you once again to all of our sponsors, Yeti, Firestone Walker, Three Tier Beverages, Arlington Capital Advisors, Envision, OI, and Juneshine. Again, we can't do this without you. And let's give it up for the Brewbound team one more time, because Jess and Zoe killed it yesterday. So the last 20 months have been tumultuous, to say the least, and the headwinds just keep coming. See the Ball increased minimum order quantities for printed cans. I'm sure all of you are loving that. So even with those challenges, there's a ton of opportunities out there, and our next speaker is going to run through some of those, as well as share where she sees the opportunity areas in 2022. Please welcome Danelle Kosmal, VP of Research at the Beer Institute, to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Justin. Thank you to the Brewbound team for having me come and present again today. Thank you to all of you for being here in person, especially after what was probably a good night of catching up with friends, new friends, old friends in the industry. So thank you for being here in person. Thanks to everybody who's watching as well. I'm really excited to finally be back to be here in person. I'm loving and excited to have my headset again, my Britney Spears headset, instead of the Apple headphones that I had for like 600 Zoom sessions last year. So it's good to be here in person. So a little bit just kind of like an update of like who I am and where I came from. This is maybe like the 6th or 7th year that I've presented in some way with Brewbound, and most of that time was with Nielsen IQ. I was with Nielsen IQ for almost 17 years. This year, I would consider myself to be part of that great resignation, and in August, I transitioned from Nielsen IQ, and I joined the Beer Institute team. So some of you may be asking what the heck is the Beer Institute. Some of you may be our members. Some of you may participate in some of our data sharing programs. Some of you may have never heard of us at all. So we're a national trade association. We represent brewers and importers of all sizes. We're based in Washington, D.C. We're one of the oldest trade associations in the country. Next year, we'll be coming up on our 160th anniversary, so we're excited about that. We're going to be planning some big events around that. So I'm the data geek. It's slide 4 only, and I'm already throwing up numbers and giving you guys a pop quiz, but it's early. Some people might be a little hungover. You need something to like wake you up. So we're in California. What is the beer industry's total economic impact in California? Thoughts on 26 billion, 40 billion, 247 billion, and 40 billion. So this is a great example of some stats that came from what we call the Beer Serves America report. It's a biennial economic impact study. It goes down to the state level. It also goes down to the congressional district level. Please, it's free. It's a free resource to everybody. Go out there. It's beerservesamerica.org. You can scroll down, get to where the map is, click on your state, your congressional district. All kinds of interesting facts about the economic contribution of beer in your congressional district and state are available there. Feel free to share those resources and communicate that information to your local lawmakers and policymakers. A few other things. I mean, I'm on the research side of the Beer Institute, so in my department, we push out a lot of monthly reports, quarterly reports, annual reports, all kinds of annual statistics about the beer industry. That's available in a lot of ways to the public, and so feel free to go out to beerinstitute.org. And then we also have some programs like the sales to retailer program. So brewers of all sizes participate in this program. It's kind of a data sharing program. It represents about 90% of the industry. We're always looking for additional participants from the long tail. And so if you're interested, please reach out to me later. And then, that's on the research side, but really at the heart of things, we're an advocacy organization, we're a lobby organization. So, as I mentioned, we're based in DC, do a lot of work on the Hill, and we also do some fun events, because really some of the best ways to teach Congress and members of the Hill about beer is to share a beer with them. So we do some fun events at the office too, which have kind of been on hold for the past year and a half, but we hope to pick that up again. Alex Davidson is here with me. He's our PR person, so he's right over there. We, as Justin mentioned, we're going to be sponsoring the networking event this afternoon, and we'll have all kinds of information and some goodies, and I think a raffle as a giveaway. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's happened in the past year. So I don't know about all of you, but I feel like so many of us have described the past 2 years as like some type of time warp. Like you walk out the door and you ask, like, did a day just pass, or 2 days, or 3 months? I'm not really sure what happened here. And as part of that time warp, there also was really a great acceleration in trends. So when we bring it back specifically to alcohol, what does that look like? The trends that were happening prior to the pandemic really continued through the pandemic, and in a lot of ways accelerated. Some of those examples are high-end growth. We know that had been happening for a decade prior to the start of the pandemic, and that continues. Spirits momentum growing, RTD growth happening. Beer losing drinking occasions. So that's one thing that I really want us to keep in mind over the next half hour or so, of how beer has been losing drinking occasions over the past decade, and how we can start to gain back some of those drinking occasions. I have hard seltzers on its way to peaking. This is not to say in any way that I think hard seltzers are like on this downward trend. I think that we saw potentially a peak for hard seltzer in the past year, and we're going to continue to see some level of growth, perhaps not at those triple-digit rates like Danny mentioned yesterday. And then a lot around convenience and packaging, convenience and e-commerce. Health and wellness is something that I'm going to talk about, because we saw that trend starting prior to the pandemic. It potentially took like a little break during the pandemic while everybody was cocooning and kind of in their own world and baking lots of bread. And now that we're coming out and entering back into somewhat of a normalized life, or normalized for now, health and wellness is definitely becoming top of mind again. Okay, so let's talk about beer. I mentioned that I've talked at Brewbound for the past 6 or 7 years or so, probably about those past 3 or 4 years. I've talked about anything but beer. I talked about Beyond Beer, I talked about seltzer, I talked about cocktails, I talked about ready to drink. So when Justin said, we want you to talk about beer, I was really excited to get back to beer. So we'll talk about beer and FMBs just for a minute, but I kind of just wanted to take a moment to step back. I know everybody's a little done having the conversation around the pandemic and what happened. This I wanted to share just so we can set the record straight a little bit. We saw a lot of conversations in the mainstream press about consumers drinking and Americans drinking like crazy during lockdown and during the pandemic. Those are fun things to say in the main press maybe, but I think we as an industry are very aware that it was really that massive shift in volume that happened, that went from on-premise, from bars and restaurants, from your tap rooms to music venues, sporting events, et cetera, to in-home consumption. And because of that in-home consumption, there was just this perception, I think, that people were drinking more. So this is some data to put behind it. In looking at beer barrels that were shipped out from suppliers over the past 10 years. And what we see is that on average, there are about 206 million barrels of beer per year that are shipped out. And within 2020, that fell, the volume levels fell just under that 206 million. So really, we're looking at pretty average numbers in terms of beer volume from 2020. And that's not even taking into account all of those kegs that had to be thrown out, that unfortunately, I'm sure many of you felt that had to be thrown out during March, April, and May of 2020. So the next time you hear friends, I hear friends say this to me all the time of like, people are drinking like crazy during the pandemic. Next time you hear friends say that, you hear policymakers say that, and they're insinuating that the beer doesn't need any support, the beer industry doesn't need any support, feel free to share this chart with them to make sure they understand that actually it was a pretty average year and it's not even taking into account all of that beer that had to be thrown away. This is just another picture of what happened in 2020. So we have that when we saw the on-premise sales drop very drastically, that's represented by that blue line, then we saw that really mirror image of that orange line for off-premise sales. We have started within the past couple of months, we started to see some of those trends normalize just a little bit, but as we all know, we're still far below the norms, especially within on-premise channels. So this is an example of that. So this is, we can dig in a little bit into category level information and to segment level information. So we'll start with the beer and FMB category overall. That gray bar represents total on and off premise. Volume is somewhat flat. We see volume levels much below the norm represented by that orange bar. I should also mention that I think it's really important when we're looking at what's happening in 2021 right now to do that comparison to 2019. First, if we do that comparison to 2020, numbers look extremely wonky in very professional terms, but it just doesn't give us a realistic idea of how the industry is performing. So if we do that comparison to 2019, I think we have a much better idea. So this is the comparison of 2019. So what we know is that the category, for the most part, and most of the segments are really underperforming in on-premise. Craft is not an exception there. We know that craft strength has always been in on-premise. There was so much more to lose for craft in on-premise, and that happened in 2020. And as we all know, we're not anywhere near back to normal trends in 2021 for the on-premise. FMBs, and that includes seltzers, of course, that's a different story. They don't have the history in on-premise like craft and imports do. They only have, there's only room for upside for FMBs and seltzers in the on-premise. And they still had some of that momentum. When we're comparing trends and volume rates back to 2019, FMBs are still performing strong. Okay, so other ways that we can look and evaluate craft beer. Craft beer styles is one of the biggest ways. And when we look at what's happening with craft beer styles and on-premise, this data comes from our friends from CGA. The on-premise data for craft beer styles still shows IPAs, largest style, over a quarter of total, this is dollars, so over a quarter of total dollars. Seasonals, still strong in terms of overall dollars. We typically see seasonals performing a little stronger in on-premise, and we're seeing that dip a little bit. In terms of trends or styles that are doing really well, the wit beer, Belgian, and wheat styles, the Blondel Golden Ale, and Bock. Okay, so now this is a look at off-premise. And again, looking at styles, this is the top 10 styles within on-premise. When we do a comparison back to 2020, 8 of those 10 styles are declining in volume compared to 2020. That's not a surprise. Nearly everything is declining in volume right now in off-premise channels. However, 2 of the styles that are growing are hazy IPAs and imperial double triple IPAs. Another thing that I wanted to do, this again is from I shouldn't mention, this is from our friends at Nielsen IQ. So this is the Nielsen IQ data in off-premise channels. Another thing that I wanted to look at was to understand, we know there's so much regionality with craft beer, and so how do those styles differ once we start looking across different regions in the US? So I looked at, of the top 10 styles in each of those regions, which styles don't fall into the top 10 national styles, if that makes sense. And that's where we see Pilsner on the west, Scottish Ale in the mountain region, Sour and American Wild Ale in that west, Midwest, Northwest Central region, Bach and Kolsch in Texas and Central South. Saison and Farmhouse in the Midwest. Amber Lager, pretty much in all of the eastern part of the country, we see more happening with Amber Lager. And then finally, in the Northeast is no elk. And so I think we all know there's one brand in particular that's really probably driving that growth in the Northeast. So now looking at craft beer styles, this again is from our friends from Nielsen IQ, looking at craft beer styles in terms of which are not necessarily which are the biggest styles, but which are the styles that are driving the most growth within the craft segment right now. No elk is kind of weird because it's not necessarily a style in any way. It's the way that a lot of data companies are kind of categorizing it right now. And no elk accounts for 40% of growth within craft. The next biggest growth driver is Imperial Double Triple IPAs, American Lagers, and hazy IPAs. I also have on the right just a list of, this is kind of the next 5 biggest growth drivers. I'd like to just understand, outside of those top 5, what are the next biggest ones that are happening. Realistically, those 5 on the right don't represent a ton of growth in terms of overall dollar volume, but their growth rates are really strong. So it just is kind of interesting to see what's happening, what are additional styles that are out there that are growing. And I will say for a handful of those styles, there are specific brands that are driving that growth. So the next thing to look at and to consider when we're kind of understanding what's driving growth trends within craft beer is packaging. We've all seen that massive shift from bottles to cans within craft beer. I can remember probably 4 years ago presenting that cans accounted for about 35 or 40% of dollars within craft beer. Now, cans account for 60% of dollars within craft beer. That's up 14 share points from just 2 years ago. Within the total category of total beer FMB cider, cans account for 66% of those dollars in off-premise channels, and that's up just 4 points from 2019. So really, it's just, we used to have more of that conversation of what cans represent in craft beer and how big is that gap compared to the total category. We're really seeing that gap close. And I think it speaks to the consumer adoption and acceptance of craft beer in cans. I think you all have done a really nice job in helping to communicate and educate consumers on craft beer in cans as well. Considering the current situation of aluminum pricing and aluminum availability, that offers a lot of, that presents a lot of challenges, obviously, to all of us. So I'll speak to that in a little bit too. And then just for reference, I do have a little bit here on sizes. So I know 19.2 ounce has been a big topic of conversation, and their dollar sales are up 190%. Slim cans. When we look, I thought it would be interesting to do a comparison of slim can volume or dollar volume across different segments in the category. So when we look at beer, FMB, cider category, slim cans account for 13% of total dollars. They account for 78% of seltzer dollars. This is all in off-premise channels. And then for craft beer, slim cans account for only 1% of total dollars. That actually was pretty surprising to me. I don't know if it was surprising to all of you. And when I kind of took a minute to think about that, of like, what does that mean now, and what does that mean for the craft beer industry, I think there are some pros and cons to it. So the pros are, if you think about the slim can shortage from a couple of years ago, most of you probably didn't have issues or challenges with that, which obviously is a huge benefit. I think some of the cons potentially would be, if we think about where the consumer usually is with slim cans, there's kind of a really strong belief in the industry that consumers have this perception of slim cans of being kind of more of a premium product. And if you think about the products that have been launched in slim cans over the past couple of years, it's hard seltzers, it's RTDs, it's higher end beer products, it's higher end FMB products. And so there potentially is, we do run that risk of like a consumer perception of kind of what a consumer might think of craft beer in a traditional 12-ounce can versus what a consumer might think of another product or liquid, alcohol liquid, within that slim can. That's not to say that I think all of you should go out and start like changing everything that you have and transition to slim cans. I think it's just worth a little more investigation to understand what potentially would your drinkers think about your product if some of your styles were in slim cans and if there was a little bit of a shift there. So we also always have a lot of conversations around hard seltzers. We know Danny talked about the number of items that increased in hard seltzers. They have to find a place on the shelf somewhere. We do think that a lot of that space is coming from craft beer. So if you look at the average number of items on shelf in off-premise channels, for the total category, that increased by about 5%. That was driven mostly by hard seltzers, which the average number of items for hard seltzers increased by 172%. Craft beer, on the other hand, declined by about 3%. So when we think about that space, and especially that coveted cold space, it's really important for us to think about how we can prioritize space for beer, in particular craft beer, how we can prioritize cold space for beer. So this is some work that we did. We did a survey just a couple of weeks ago with the Harris poll. We talked to alcohol drinkers 21 plus, so anybody that drinks beer, wine, and spirits. One of the questions that we asked was, of all of the products that you see here, which products would you prefer to have them cold when you purchase them? Beer by far was the preference to be cold when you purchase them. So nearly half of the respondents said they prefer beer to be cold. I think what's interesting, the next was wine, and I had some people ask questions about that, and it's really sparkling wine and white wine that drives that of an interest or preference to have it cold. What was really interesting to me is when you start to see where seltzers and canned cocktails fall. So it isn't to say that seltzers and canned cocktails should be removed from the cold space entirely. I really think that we need to think about how we're prioritizing that cold space, especially if the consumer preference is for beer. Okay, so what are some of the opportunities that we see in the industry? I always like to go back to the consumer because I think that's one of the easiest ways that we can find opportunities. I'm calling it the 3 C's, and really it's the 1 C, and it's consumer. So it's consumer demographics, consumer trends, and consumer experience. Starting with consumer demographics, we could spend probably 6 days talking about consumer demographics and opportunities across all different types of consumers for the craft beer industry. I'm starting with the gender imbalance, though, because we all know the gender imbalance and the balance that happens in terms of beer drinkers and craft beer drinkers when it comes to women and men. We have a lot more volume and a lot more drinkers coming from men versus women for beer and craft beer. What was interesting is this also came from the Harris poll that we just fielded a couple of weeks ago, but what was interesting was what popped for non-alcoholic beverages. So it wasn't breaking out beer, wine, and spirits in any way. It was just saying non-alcoholic beer, wine, and spirits. And there's definitely a stronger skew towards men than women. And so I think that's something for us to consider in terms of where potentially are there opportunities for this when we're looking at women and men drinkers. Also, as part of the survey, we just kind of wanted an understanding of like consumer perception of beer. And when we think about women who are alcohol drinkers, so anybody who drinks beer, wine, and spirits, nearly half of them said beer is fun to share with friends and family. And that was even lower. The men, it was 43% of male drinkers. And so I think it goes back to first, I'm a woman who drinks beer, and I love to say, and I love to stand on stage and say, women drink beer. So let's talk to this consumer group because it's going to be one of the easiest and low-hanging fruit in terms of our opportunity to increase the number of people who are drinking beer and increase the number of drinking occasions for beer. And one way that we can connect with women is knowing that women, like, I think drinking beer is fun. I love to drink beer with friends and family. So another thing around consumer trends, these are trends that I've been talking about for the past couple of years that have been really driving what's happening within alcohol. And what we saw is that in a lot of ways, they accelerated through the pandemic as well. So convenience, wellness, and experience. And over the next couple of minutes, I'm going to focus on the wellness piece of it. There have been a lot of conversations over the past 2 years or so around mindful drinking, consumers who want to reduce their alcohol intake, et cetera. And so as part of this Harris poll from a couple weeks ago, we talked to drinkers and asked if they're taking actions to reduce their alcohol consumption. Now, we will keep in mind that it is a little skewed because everybody wants to say that they're reducing their alcohol consumption when it might not be as high as what they think or it's maybe intentions versus actions. That said, though, nearly half of drinkers said that they're taking actions to reduce their alcohol consumption. And that's higher, it's 55% for men. That's pretty consistent with some of these types of survey questions that I've seen over the past couple of years where it's a greater percentage of men that are thinking more about mindful drinking occasions and reducing alcohol consumption. And a couple different ways that they're doing that. One is about a quarter of respondents said that they're reducing by just drinking fewer number of days, like not as many days per week. Maybe they're only drinking on the weekend. About an equal amount of drinkers said they're reducing their alcohol consumption by just not drinking as much per occasion. Another one that popped was about 20% of respondents said they reduced their alcohol intake to improve mental clarity. I don't know if we're all kind of feeling that this morning and how last night was for us. And then something that was interesting to me was one of the items that fell a little bit lower on the list was only 17% of drinkers said that they consume more low alcohol or no alcohol products in order to reduce their alcohol consumption. And I think that presents the biggest opportunity for us. So if we have a lot more drinkers that are thinking about mindful drinking occasions or ways to reduce their total alcohol intake, and kind of the go-to is just to not drink as much, but let's instead present them with different products and more distribution and more availability of those low alcohol and no alcohol products. Another theme around this and mindful drinking is taking drinking breaks. So that could be doing dry January, sober October, sober September, taking a break for Whole30 for a month or whatever else. And in that case, we see that being much more popular around those drinkers 21 to 34. So half of drinkers 21 to 34 said that they're taking some type of drinking break. That was higher for craft beer drinkers. I can get the exact numbers for you, but I think it was about 62% for craft beer drinkers and even higher for hard seltzer drinkers. It was about 66%. And then when we think about the types of drinking breaks that they're doing, a lot of them, about a quarter, it was for health and wellness reasons. About 20%, so 1 in 5 of drinkers 21 through 34 participated in dry January or sober September. And this is another theme where we see kind of those mindful drinking occasions or drinking breaks being a little more popular among men than women. So this, I'm sure, is very difficult for all of you to see, so apologize. I will send the deck out to anybody who wants it. But this is, we wanted to understand of drinking occasions that happen, and among those alcohol drinkers, what type of drinking occasions would they consider drinking no-alc or low-alc products? And when we look, this is a breakout of the responses among average alcohol drinkers, so everybody who drinks beer, wine, and spirits, and then the orange bar is the craft beer drinker. For both of those groups, the top 3 occasions were relaxing at home, out with friends and family, or at a social gathering. So pretty core traditional beer drinking occasions. I think that's interesting because if we think about those people who are looking for ways to reduce alcohol but still want to be social and drinking a beer in some way, a non-alcoholic beer is an interesting way to do that. One other area of opportunity that I saw was around something that popped specifically for craft beer drinkers was they would be more willing to consider drinking a non-alcoholic product after a workout and then for lunch. Okay, so this is getting now to that third C of consumer experience. We all know, especially when we talk about craft beer drinkers, we know that craft beer drinkers seek experience, and they're really more of a promiscuous drinker. We see that in the other types of alcohol that they're drinking. 80% say that they're drinking hard seltzers, they're drinking non-alc, RTDs, flavored. I think what we can do with this information is first to understand, I mean, if you're offering a lot of different types of products as part of your portfolio and you're offering hard seltzers along with craft beer, you're obviously meeting a lot of different consumer needs. If you are a brewery that just has craft beer or just has beer, there are also ways that you can meet those needs through flavors, through different types of styles. I think flavors in particular is a big piece of that. Also around experience, these are just a couple of fun questions that we asked on the survey of kind of how do people connect with beer? One of the most obvious is barbecue or cookout. So this is looking across drinkers of beer, wine, and spirits. Just over half say that beer goes great with a barbecue or cookout. If we're looking at beer drinkers, like, you know, more engaged beer drinkers, that would be a little bit higher, but when we look across beer, wine, spirit drinkers, it's a little over half. 42% of drinkers say that beer goes well with some of their favorite foods. And what I thought was interesting was 43% of wine drinkers thought that beer goes well with some of their favorite foods. So everything that we hear about wine pairing and food pairing, more wine drinkers say that beer goes well with some of their favorite foods. And then finally, 1 in 3 drinkers say they love supporting local craft breweries. We all know this. Sometimes it's just nice to have numbers behind it and a good reminder of that. I think that if we think about that, like how all of our behaviors have changed in the past 2 years, if I think personally within my 1 block radius, my neighbors and I did for the past year and a half or whatever, we did a lot of like the neighborhood gatherings, and everybody just came out, brought their own beer, brought their own whatever they were drinking, and we gathered for a little bit, and that was it. In the past month or two, a lot of that has transitioned to visits, and everybody has, it's like families, everybody has kids, visits to one of our local breweries. So that neighborhood in the parking lot by all of our townhouses transitioned to Port City Saturdays. And so I think just keep that in mind of where consumers are and where drinkers are, and that we found ways to get through the past couple of years and be social, and now we're looking for ways to get back to and engage again with our local breweries, engage again with beer, engage again in bars and restaurants. So headwinds for beer, especially in looking at 2020. We're still facing a lot of challenges, right? First is on-premise isn't anywhere back to normal pre-COVID trends. We see some of the trends of velocity rates are up, and that's true, but a lot of locations have closed completely or just aren't back up and running again. So of those locations that are open, velocity is really high, but we still see on-premise not anywhere near back to normal trends. We see labor shortages. I know all of you have really felt that pain, especially within the hospitality industry. Supply chain challenges with aluminum pricing and aluminum availability, rising costs across the board with consumer goods. And that consumer shift, and I spoke to this a little bit of like beer drinking or beer losing drinking occasions and that shift to higher alcohol, spirits, and hard liquor. But I don't want to leave you with like complete doom and gloom, so here are some closing thoughts on that. First is leverage. I know this sounds like really naive and I don't know what, but leverage creative packaging solutions. So when we think about some of the challenges with aluminum, aluminum and cans, of course, are key. At the same time, I remember 10 years ago where growlers started to become a little popular in grocery stores. Like, what are ways that temporarily we can get around this to continue to engage beer drinkers? Second is foster inclusive environment for employees and consumers. I haven't really talked to this, but I think it's something that as an industry, I hope we continue to engage and think about. Steve from New Belgium, I heard him talk a couple weeks ago about shifts in culture of their organization and how coming from the spirit industry, employees, companies, and consumers look very different. And if we have that same culture within beer, it's just going to present more opportunities and more diversity for us. In terms of your portfolio and where you sell them, as much as possible, if you can diversify that across on-premise, and your tap room, I think it just presents a little more protection for you. Engage consumers with the fun side of beer. So think about, you all have amazing stories. You're master brewers, or if you are your master brewer, you have amazing stories. Drinkers want to hear about that. Do a webinar for an hour and take people around your brewery on the webinar, and then find a way at the end of that webinar to bring them back into your tap room. Create solutions for the consumer need of experience with convenience. We all talk about how consumers, drinkers are, they continue to gravitate toward the need for convenience, the need for experience. But what's key is they really need both of those together. They want like a really cool experience, but they want it to be convenient too. And then finally, leverage the Beer Institute resources. We have a ton of free resources on our website. It's beerinstitute.org. Feel free to download any of those reports and reach out to me if you have any questions. And with that, I hopefully will see all of you and share a beer this afternoon.
Awesome.
Okay.
Nice work. It's for questions here, so I'm the captain now. So one of the things that I noticed up there, those 19.2 numbers for single serves.
Yeah.
Totally, lots of growth. How much of that do you believe is driven by increased mobility now that people are back out and about versus, this is where things are headed? And I know this is largely where things are headed, but...
Yeah. We've seen a little bit of a bounce back in the past year in C-store, and I think that's important. That's more important for the broader beer category, but there's still a ton of opportunity for craft beer too. And I think when you think about singles or even the 19.2, I think that's where, I think your point around mobility is spot on. I think what we're missing in what we would have had prior to the pandemic is kind of that commuter traffic. I lived in Chicago for years. I worked not far from the train station, and you would see somebody run into Walgreens, pick up a beer, and go to the train. So it's that part of it that, our culture has changed so much that we're missing that piece of especially mobility.
Yeah. Another thing that's going on, we've got inflationary headwinds, we've got supply chain headwinds. Several companies have said they plan to increase prices. We know those STEMI checks are fading, and all our cash reserves are getting eaten up. So what's your expectations for how consumers are going to react to those price increases?
I think we can look historically of what we know. So if we use, recessions as an example in the history of recession, historically, we don't see, people talk about how alcohol is recession-proof, and in a way it is, because people continue to see it as their special treat. So I might not splurge as much on bread or the special cheeses that I buy or something else, but I might still splurge on my favorite six-pack of beer because that's my special treat.
Do you expect these increases, do you expect them to be felt more on-premise or off?
Both, probably.
Both.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to throughout the pandemic, we saw this divergence in consumers and the way that people experienced the pandemic and how they're coming out of the pandemic. And you have some who unfortunately were really financially strapped and some that ended up saving a lot of money. And so those consumption patterns we're going to see, that take place. And I think the same thing is going to happen in on-premise and off-premise, especially in on-premise. I think we won't see as much volume and engagement with some of those consumers that have been more financially strapped. But for people that have been saving for the past year and a half, then, when they do go out, they might be, okay with spending a little bit more on their favorite beer.
Donnell, you're always awesome. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, give it up for Donnell. I'm going to turn it over to Jess and then move over a seat.
Good morning, everybody. So as we're looking ahead to 2022, our next guests are here to give us perspective on how you can sell more beer in both the on and off-premise channels, which is why we're all here. So joining us today are two people who somehow have not yet been on the same panel, which is wild to me because I feel like I've Zoomed with both of these guys, once a month. But we have Jason Murphy, who is the Beverage Product and Program Innovation Manager for Buffalo Wild Wings. Hey, bud. And Mary Guyver, the Global Principal Category Merchant for Beer and Spirits at Whole Foods, who is wearing some excellent kicks today. So.
Hi, am I sitting here?
Those are great kicks.
Right.
Good to see you.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
This is so much
We finally
fun.
did it.
I know.
This is so great. I'm
I
so
know.
excited.
It's
good to
been
meet
so
you guys
good to see
actually in
people
person.
in person.
I know. It's so weird.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into it. If a supplier walked through your door or Zoom meeting today, what can they say to get your attention?
I'm going to go first. Okay. We've really concentrated the amount of time that we meet face-to-face or on Zoom with our suppliers. We're talking like 20-minute meetings at this point, so they have to really focus in on the high-level takeaways around what makes their product special. So whether that's metrics around top-performing items or brands in the market in their category, or trends, or capturing share of a category, those have been historically things that we ask for. If not that, then really showing up with some white space items that are really unique. If not that, then the Whole Foods kind of ethos around something that you're doing beyond the product can really get us time with you one-on-one. What I will say about, and it's in keeping with everything we've seen in the themes so far this week, is that the metrics aren't what they used to be. They're extraordinarily muddy right now. So I'm actually going to pull a page from the presentation we just saw and really underscore the fact that it's about the consumer right now. So more than anything, understanding who your shopper is and why your product meets the needs that they're looking for, that's what we want to see.
Yeah, I would say I really want to understand, I want our supplier partners to have a really good understanding of how their products are going to be successful within a Buffalo Wild Wings. Not everything is going to be a national mandate anymore. So I like to start small with our partners. I like to get small wins, and then we expand from there. A lot of people come in and they want, their IPA product on tap in every Buffalo Wild Wings across the country or across their footprint, and our buyer just doesn't act like that anymore. There are very few products that deserve a national mandate in the Buffalo Wild Wings, or really any on-premise account for that matter. And so we really try to make sure that we always have the right product for the right guest for the right occasion, and working with a partner who kind of has that understanding of, hey, this product makes a lot of sense in 3 or 5 states, and let's start there and grow our relationship from a small start. I think that's what's really impactful for me when I'm making first introductions to people.
One reminder, too, we've got that text line open. That's 818-699-0760, 818-699-0760. So, Jason, somebody gets into a Buffalo Wild Wings. How long do you give that product time to succeed? What's the time frame there?
We run our mandate cycle on a 1-year time frame, typically on a spring-to-spring basis to kind of coordinate with off-premise resets and when those happen. So I think 6 months is about the right amount of time where we can really evaluate whether a product is healthy and moving for us or not. Typically, I choose partners over products and partners who I feel like are going to be good for Buffalo Wild Wings and help support our sports bars and really drive the overall beer program. The product goes a long way into it as well, but most of the time, if for some reason we're seeing a slow volume moving product, I'd still like to stick with that partner for a little bit and see if we can find a win within their portfolio. I typically don't have many partners who have multiple draft products with us just because tap handle space is so precious. I've only got 22 handles that I can play around with. And so if there's a product that's not moving, I'll normally switch up to a different product within the same partner before having to hopefully not move away from it, but find some success with them in something, the portfolio.
How about you, Mary? How long does a product get to succeed at Whole Foods?
About the same. We're already on to the next review cycle typically by the time we put a product in store. So we don't want to just look at the recent data and decide if it's working for us. We want to see the full life cycle. That said, there's always exceptions. If something is clearly just a gap in execution, we'll address it quicker.
So what's the most frustrating thing when you're working with suppliers at the moment? Like Mary, how bad are out of stock issues for you right now?
They're surprisingly not as bad as they were last year. Last year was really wild, and we had, between the can shortages and a lot of other issues, they were pretty bad. And maybe that's not a safe comparison because last year was just a wild ride in general. But the biggest out of stocks and issues that we see currently are all related to logistics and supply chain. So it's a lot of imports that are seeing some challenges, but I would say that it's not as drastic as I would have expected, all things considered, at this point.
Jason, what are you seeing? Some of the same kind of stuff?
I would say we have been really lucky in not seeing too many out of stocks, seeing the same kind of import out of stocks that Mary's seen. But from a lot of our domestic and craft partners, we've been pretty good with keeping product in stock. I'd say the most frustrating thing for me has been a lack of innovation just in the beer space. I know there's a lot of new entrants into the category, and I see you laughing, and I don't want to talk about cold IPAs. We're not going to get there yet. But I see most of the products that are
there.
I know, I'm sorry. But most of the products that are being pitched to us right now are hard seltzers and imperial IPAs or things chasing off-premise trends, which is great, and I understand why that's happening. But for me, I only have 22 handles. There's not much I can do with, a 15th hazy IPA and 100th hard seltzer in my set. So I'd like to see more innovation in the beer space. I hope it's coming in 2022, but that's probably the most frustrating thing is just everything looks the same to me right now.
So on the topic of local and craft, how is that playing for you at Buffalo Wild Wings at this point?
I think we need to take a deeper look into local and what our guest wants in our sports bars out of local craft. I think 4 or 5 years ago, zip code local was probably more important than it is today. I think if someone wants zip code local or the beer that's down the street from our sports bar, they're probably just going to those tap rooms and enjoying the experience in that tap room anyway. I don't know if they necessarily need that from a Buffalo Wild Wings. They just want a really good curated beer experience. And they still want local beer, which probably means, within their county, definitely within their state. So we've got to do a good job of managing that. But I don't know if the zip code local matters as much to our guests as it used to a few years ago.
How important is it at Whole Foods at this point?
Local's always been super important for us, and we continue to protect that space and ensure that we have those partners. But I agree, especially coming out of what we've been dealing with on-premise being closed, as brew pubs down the street from our stores open up and local is right down the road, I think that there is a shopper that would rather go to the brew pub. That's not to say that we don't want to also be a destination for them, but I think that's a really unique, specific craft consumer that as we kind of start to parse the consumer out of craft into different segments, that's one that really enjoys what our friend David Walker was talking about yesterday in terms of the theatrics and the brew pub being a destination. That's where they thrive. And while we want to be a great partner as a retailer, it's a little bit challenging when we know that they're given the chance to reopen their brew pub and drive traffic there. We have to find out how we fit into that as a brick and mortar retailer. That said, blanket statement, we always want to support our local brands.
Is today's 20-something Gen Zers, are they more concerned about carbon neutrality than locality? Are you seeing stuff like that?
I think that they're asking the questions for sure. If there's something being brewed and put on tap in the same facility, that's a little bit easier to swallow if you're concerned about a carbon footprint than driving down the road or driving across the state and seeing the same beer and buying it there. More than anything, I think that as we're seeing the headwinds coming around packaging, that's where I think there's going to be, I'm anticipating a shift with local producers focusing more on their on-premise. And what we saw with the boom of authorized new items last year for craft, and we were so excited to be that partner that they could turn to as an off-prem option in a pinch. I can see some of that potentially scaling back a little bit. So how we're going to deal with that as we head into 2022 is still a question mark. But with the aluminum challenges coming, I think there's going to be some pretty interesting changes.
Jason, we talked a little bit about styles a couple minutes ago, but you're seeing a ton of hazy IPAs, ton of hard seltzers. But what other styles are gaining traction? You know, we've seen this move to flavor. So how does that play out within the beer space?
Yeah, I think we're seeing the hard seltzerification of beer, if that's a word. We'll make it up. We'll make it a word.
Winification?
Yeah, it's the hard seltzerification of beer. And that's where, there's a lot of data that says that hard seltzer drinkers were sourced from light lager drinkers. So they got used to their, lime White Claws and their mixed berry Trulies and beer or seltzers that had a little bit more fruit flavor to them. And now that they're maybe going back to beer, not in the, the seltzer's dying headlines that you would read, but going back to beer on different occasions, they want something more than they were getting from their light lagers that they were drinking before seltzers. They want something with fruited flavors to it. So I think that's why you're seeing brands like Golden Road Mango Cart do so well. We've seen Stone Buena Vesa Salt and Lime Lager do really well in our sports bars, and I think if you've got that added fruit to it, that's something the consumer is gravitating for. It's we're bringing grapefruit Sculpin back, 6-7 years later. So I think that's something that our guest is really looking for out of a beer experience and a B-dubs is just a little bit more added flavor or punch. So that's been big for us.
We're getting a lot of great audience questions, so keep those coming. What are the top 3 subcategories you see driving growth within your assortment in 2022? We'll start with you, Mary.
As we see the changes in the Beyond Beer landscape, the hard seltzer world it can't just park. It needs to adapt. So FMBs that are starting to knock on the door and show up with things like hard tea flavors, obviously hard kombuchas are a big one especially for a Whole Foods consumer. Non-alc, essentially the Beyond Beer, better for you landscape seems to be driving a lot of growth. And how our craft players are starting to dabble in that space is really interesting, trying to keep a close eye on that as well. Those are the ones that are typically driving growth. And in terms of flavor profiles, I agree. There's things that are a little bit more of a hybrid approach, like they're cocktail-inspired beer flavors, or they're more focused on, and I'm really excited about this, the kind of elevated occasion that beer can bring. So if you're talking about a tea base or even a beer base, but you can incorporate what we've seen in some of the pitches, even really unique flavor profiles. So you're not kind of pigeonholing yourself as a style like a hazy IPA or a big IPA. You're opening yourself up to a dinner pairing or an elevated experience. So I see a lot of those flavors driving that, and I see that across all of the categories, not just Beyond Beer.
What do you think, Jason?
I think low and no alc has a huge opportunity to drive sales in our sports bars next year, not just in beer, but also in spirit-free drinks, mocktails. That category has a lot of run room for us, and it's something that our guests has surveyed back to us and told us that they place a lot of importance on that when they come to have a visit at Buffalo Wild Wings. So the last presentation with Danielle was really interesting. I took a lot out of all the no-alc trends that we're seeing popping up. So that could be a big category for us. I think hazy IPAs are going to continue to do really well for us. And then we've got to figure out how to unlock the seltzer and Beyond Beer occasion. We've done a decent job of trying to figure out how to do hard seltzer on draft, because hard seltzer and package wasn't doing anything for us, like much of the RTDs and Beyond Beer category is done. But now that we figured out how to get some of those products on draft, we're starting to see a little bit more traction in those categories.
So, Jason, how deep are you willing to go into Beyond Beer offerings in your sports bars?
Pretty deep. We completely reimagined our package cooler for our September reset that just hit, mostly to accommodate for Beyond Beer growth. Our package cooler was a little bloated with light lagers and things that were duplicitous of things we were already selling really well on draft. So we really took a step back and took a look at our package cooler to figure out, okay, how do we want to build this to ensure that when a guest comes to a Buffalo Wild Wings, they've got a good assortment of products and categories to choose from, not only in draft, but in package. So we've started to bring in a good amount of national and regional and local brands of hard seltzers, hard kombuchas. We're looking at teas. We're looking at coffees. We're looking at the entire Beyond Beer segment because if it makes sense for a few guests who want it, I want to make sure that I've got that product so that they remember that we have that the next time they're thinking of where they want to go out to drink.
So how does non-alc factor into that? How much space are you willing to give non-alc beer?
I don't know yet, but I'm excited about it. I think that, especially, again, with some of the stuff we saw today, I think the drinker is going in that direction. We know that our guest spends a considerable amount of time on our sports bars. They're there for, 3 hours watching a football game, and to just be, responsible stewards running a beverage program, we should make sure that we've got some good non-alc or low-alc drinks for them to enjoy when they're ready to switch over from their 7% IPA, but not ready to leave the restaurant yet because it's, the fourth quarter and the game's close and they don't want to go home. So I think non-alc beer makes a ton of sense for us. I think we're really going to look at expanding our mocktail and spirit-free cocktail section, and I think it's a huge white space that I don't know how much room we can grow, but we're definitely going to spend some time to explore that and see what that category can look like for us next year.
Mary, how are you looking at non-alcs?
It's definitely a big growth opportunity for us as well. The challenge when you're a brick and mortar is that you have a finite amount of space. That's not a mystery. It's just very challenging when you have craft partners who are launching non-alc alongside hard kombucha and the other things we're talking about in that non-craft space in your set. That means you're taking placements away from another category that's potentially growing. So we're being really deliberate about it. We're being careful to choose the right products, the right partners in the right places, really just focused on the customer, the demographics. It varies as brands around the country get in that game. There needs to be a local representation. And it starts to get really complicated. Final thing I'll say about non-alc is when you have brands that are traditionally a grocery product that want to get a piece of this because they're kind of positioned as like a hoppy tea or a hoppy water that aren't distributed through a traditional beer network or just have a different pricing structure, et cetera, it starts to get really complicated. So it's just kind of every chance I get, just throwing that out there that before you sit down to have a meeting when you're pitching a non-alc, be ready to speak to the fact that you have what your distributor network is like, what your intentions are, what your promotions are, what your margins are, and who your customer is. At the end of the day, again, if you feel like you have a customer base from non-alc that can transition over to the beer wall, great. But do your homework around who your customer is.
Mary, Whole Foods, this is an audience question. Whole Foods allows a certain percentage of beers they carry to be determined by the individual location's buyers. They recently decreased this percentage, and they'd like to hear you speak on that decision.
I think there's a conception, or I guess a misconception about some of the changes that we've done recently. We've always protected space for there to be what we refer to as flex. There's certainly local space. How we structure that program has evolved quite a bit in the past year, and the intent is always to have the boots on the ground and the folks in the local zip code talking to the local suppliers and funneling that up to us. That's still absolutely part of our program. We are committed to making sure that we have local products represented not just in craft beer, but it's also important to understand that that's translating over into beyond beer categories. Like apart from imports, you see local represented in kombucha and seltzer and non-alc. So it's actually kind of spread out across our cooler in a new way, where historically I think we are used to seeing it like as a big section of craft beer. Mm-hmm. So just the reallocation of space, but still absolutely interested in incubating small local brands.
So Mary, how up for grabs is the Beyond Beer shelf space at Whole Foods? And where are you drawing the line at beyond offerings that are calling out health attributes, or probiotics or vitamin C and hard seltzers? What is that going to look like?
Great question. I would say if anybody has any kind of question or concern around products that they're trying to integrate some kind of adaptogen or better for you, whether you're talking about vitamin C or yerba mate or anything like that, we're here as a sounding board because we do have very strict quality standards. And when you stray into the space of trying to call something that's alcoholic good for you, it starts to get tricky. So I would encourage everybody that we work with to, again, kind of do a little bit of homework around where they might be straying into dangerous waters and reach out to us if they have any questions about it. We're here to be a sounding board and kind of be a guiding light. And we might not have all the answers yet because there are so many new, bizarre, new items and ingredients being added into the products that we carry that they sound great, but they can get problematic real fast if you're adding them to. Like a probiotic is a really tricky thing. It's only allowed in hard kombucha. When you start adding that to a hard seltzer or something, it starts to get a little murky.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of class action lawsuits lately.
Yeah. So I just avoid them.
Yeah.
Ask.
So Jason, on a different topic, how important are your relationships with wholesalers? Like, do you build a relationship with a wholesaler? Do they play a role in the products you choose to purchase?
Yeah, that's a good question. Honestly, I don't have that many relationships with wholesalers across the country. My relationship is very supplier-driven. It's a supplier-retailer relationship, and our wholesalers have great relationships with our field teams, our franchisees, and our operators, but I don't hear from our wholesalers that often, and I think that's something we'd like to fix. I think I'd like to know priorities more from wholesalers, how they can help support our restaurants, the trends that they're seeing, because everything right now is just so supplier driven. I'm reliant on that relationship to kind of understand what's going on in each individual market and help build things out, but I think we can be a lot more collaborative by introducing a lot more wholesalers to our planning process. I've got great relations with some, and I've got zero relationship with most. And so I think that's something that not just on-premise with Buffalo Wild Wings, but on-premise in general, can improve the relationship, the wholesaler-retailer relationship side of things.
So another audience question here for both of you, top-down or bottom-up. How does a new supplier work with you? Direct to you or first through the store's regional buyers? We'll start with Mary.
How do they get time with?
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to my original point around knowing their shopper. If they feel like they have a national shopper and they should be talking to a national buyer, and they feel like that's a space that is going to be beneficial for both of us to have that conversation, then come ready to speak about it. But we have such kind of a different tiered approach to how we bring in new brands, that talking with your local beer buyer, talking with your regional territory manager at Whole Foods, but also just referencing our supplier portal for those kind of updates around who the contacts are. That's a great place to start. Ultimately, I can't be everywhere all the time, so we do rely on like the essentially the tree, the tree of beer life that is Whole Foods. It has roots all the way down to store level, and we still intake information at a store level around if they're trying to get access. We'll do a better job. I think that a lot of the evolution that we've experienced this year is making sure that our boots on the ground team understands how to hand off. Like if you're looking to get a meeting with Mary and the national team, like here's where you start. Because we have round review schedules, we have promo review schedules, and all of that is kind of posted as a one-stop shop.
Jason, is this the part of the program where you give out your email address again?
Yeah, sure. We'll put my email address out there again. It's jmurphy@inspirebrands.com. I think I've made it's clear that if you want to reach out to me, I'm fairly approachable. You can get a hold of me if you want to. My stance has always been, if you want to help me sell more beer in a Buffalo Wild Wings, like I'll give you 20, 30 minutes and we can have a conversation. And I might not always be able to help you, but I can at least give you the tools and resources to help sell beer at a Buffalo Wild Wings. So it happens both ways. I can work top down, you can work bottom up. We've got a lot of supplier partners who are doing great things in the field that I've never met before, and that's great. And if they want to have a conversation, that's fine. But the more relationships I can make, the better our beer program is going to be. So that's kind of the approach that I've always taken.
We also have an open door supplier call twice a year that we try to answer a lot of questions. So literally anybody that's interested in the beer industry that wants to know what we're up to or what changes are ahead, that information is posted on our supplier portal, supplier.wholefoodsmarket.com.
Can I join that call? I would love to be on that call. Okay.
I mean, we'll talk about it later.
You're such a fanboy.
I am a fanboy. Yeah, I'm a huge Mary fan.
I think we all are.
Yeah.
Oh, stop, you guys.
Jason, I'm sorry I didn't compliment your sneakers too, but yours are awesome.
Oh,
I
thank
was
you.
gonna
appreciate
say.
it. Yeah.
Shoe game.
So
I put a lot
one
of work into it.
hot topic this year that I feel like we haven't even talked about at all: spirits-based RTDs. Mary, do they fit in your shelf sets, and how do they fit on on-premise menus?
I don't know if you want to go first, but this is a loaded topic for me.
I can be very quick. We're still trying to figure it out. I think there's a mix of what do we want to make fresh and have our bartenders make behind the bar, and what might make sense for us to have some cans. I think definitely for the Bev Alc to go experience, we definitely need to have some RTDs, spirits-based RTDs in the cooler, so that we can sell those out the door. I don't think we're going to be hand-making cocktails for the to-go experience. From an on-premise experience, we don't really know yet.
So we recognized that this ascending category was coming, and I also manage spirits for our off-prem, and so we had to make kind of a really tough, very fast pivot towards the end of the year coming into the holidays to adjust our cold space to accommodate canned cocktails. And part of that was that our ambient spirit sets are very, very small. And so they're too bulky, they're a different occasion, and they're supposed to be ready to drink, so we wanted them cold. So we made a pretty intense decision to add them into our cold boxes at the end of this year, where we have licenses. That space is tricky because it's contingent upon our beer cooler. So if we have a very intense spirit consumer base in a specific store, it doesn't necessarily translate into the size of our beer cooler, and vice versa. So it's been a work in progress, I can say that. And how we approached finding that space in the cooler, which is everybody's question, is we didn't want to go after, like looking at some of the slides in this morning's presentation, we don't want to touch craft. We're committed to it. Craft beer is a huge part of what we do. Don't want to touch imports. That's a huge part of our consumer base. And with Beyond Beer growing the way it was like, what do we do? So rather than dig into some of these categories that we stand by and want to see grow, we went after format. So it's a controversial move, but we took a hard look at what we used to treat as its own category, which is single serve. And in a year where larger multi-packs were doing really well, we decided to take a break from those, just a break, and carve up some space to integrate RTD cocktails into our sets. And now we can strategically approach that format in a different way than we used to, and try to isolate the grab and go versus the 750 occasion high-end Belgian versus a Pliny and a high-end craft set.
I know it's early days, but the ball minimum orders, do you expect some type of trickle down to your shelf set eventually? Because you mentioned that local is so important to what you do.
Yeah.
Like, is that going to mess up your shelf space at all?
That's kind of what I was hinting at earlier, and it's tough to say because it's purely speculation, and I don't want to sound like it's some kind of action that we're taking. I am anticipating that I guess I should say if, because who knows what's happening in our world, but if on-premise continues to come back to life coming out of what we've been dealing with, for those local brands that can't meet that new minimum, I would expect to see them scale back and focus more on draft and not start trying to chase after the minimums for can orders. And that means that's going to impact our assortment. And like I said, we got this great partnership that really shined last year when we were able to bring in a lot of products that we weren't carrying to begin with because they pivoted to package. So part of me is just anticipating that by the time we get to middle of next year, we'll see some of that scaled back.
I guess another hot button topic would be pricing. What do you expect? We know that suppliers are increasing price. What do you expect at your stores this year, Jason?
Yeah, we've got a group of really smart finance analytics team that's way smarter than I am in making decisions on pricing like that, but I would expect that, like all other industries, we'll probably see price increase in all aspects of our business.
Your same expectation, I imagine.
Keeping a very close eye on it. Yeah, it's hard when you work with the amount of brands and items that we have. We're an unusual retailer in that way, and so we're going to have to rely very much on our suppliers and our wholesale and distributor partners to keep us focused, so that we don't. It's not a guessing game. The timing is going to be really interesting and very dynamic and challenging.
That's
politics.
A nice political answer.
Politics.
Yeah, I mean, we're 50% franchise run, so our franchisees are going to make the decisions that they feel is best for their business. And if prices are going up around them, I can only assume they're going to react with in kind by raising prices. So.
I think there's also an opportunity for us to kind of dabble in the on-premise with these changes that are happening with package, try to find a way to help kind of invite folks to come and have a draft that might be a little bit easier for us in terms of a margin building opportunity, and for our partners who are going to maybe move away from package. So that's an evolution that we're working on as well, as we examine and kind of strategically evolve our taproom space in some of our stores.
Well, let's end this on either a positive or negative note, depending on how you guys are going to answer this. What was the most exciting new product you were pitched for 2022? We'll start with you, Jason.
Oh, that's a good question. Most exciting new product. I've been really excited by some of the non-alc craft that I've seen. I think the technology in the brewing process and how to de-alkalize craft beer has come a really long way. We're way past the days of Caliber and O'Doul's, and the quality of the non-alc product is just absolutely fantastic. So some of the non-alc craft products I've seen I've been really impressed with.
This is really hard for me to pick. I'm going to go way left turn, and I wouldn't even say that it's necessarily a pitch, and I'll say it's from a conversation I just had. Oh my God, we're over time. From a conversation I just had with one of my favorite suppliers in the entire world. I think there's a really excellent opportunity, going back to my earlier comment about elevating the occasion of beer. It was in the slides earlier, like it's a way to integrate it into your social world, and beer is so dynamic and ready for food pairings and glassware and things that we haven't done yet. It feels to me like white space. And so I would say that brands that are making high-end products, high-end Belgian Flanders red ales in cans, when you start to make things that you can bring into a set that's approachable, and you can not only net a consumer that loves that brand and knows that brand, but bring in customers that might not know it, that are craft adjacent, start understanding that shopper, find a way to get them into something that's new and exciting, but also extraordinarily old school and elegant.
Anybody that's watched our front lines with you would know that already.
I know.
So
I'm just saying, they're here.
yeah. Well, we're going to take a short break. These guys are probably going to be hanging out, so you could probably hit them up and ask questions if you didn't get the chance. So we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back for the Pitch Slam finals. So thanks. Give it up for these guys.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, we hope you're enjoying our Brewbound Live program. My name is Justin Kindle, and I'm the editor of Brewbound, and I'm joined by Brewbound reporter Zoe Licata. How you doing, Zoe?
I'm doing great.
Well, we hope you guys are enjoying the program. You can check out the full agenda at brewbound.com, but first, we've got a special interview right now. Our next guest is in the process of opening a 24,000 square foot brewery and incubator in South Central Los Angeles. Joining us now is Craig Bowers, one of the co-founders and the CEO of People's Republic of South Central and the South Los Angeles Beverage Company. Thanks for joining us, Craig.
Thank you for having me.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing all well.
It's good to have you here. And, you know, you and your partner, Samuel Chawinga, are doing a pretty impressive project there in Los Angeles. And we want to talk about that. So where are you guys in the process at this point?
As you said, it's a 24,000 square foot facility in South Los Angeles, which is, and the area that we're actually in particular is in a federal opportunity zone. So there's an existing 13,000 square foot building, and there's about 9,000 square feet of additional space in which we're going to be building a new building on that piece of land as well, to kind of round out all of the things that we're trying to do on site.
What's your target date for opening at this point?
Today, I'd say to you, will be open before the end of the first half of 22. But it's always a moving target when you're building a brewery in the city of Los Angeles. There's just a lot of hurdles, that there's a reason why in Los Angeles, most of the breweries are located in these smaller cities. Just the turnaround time is just a lot faster.
Despite those hurdles that you might be facing, you were really intentional with choosing your location for this project. Why was it so important for you to be in South Central LA?
Yeah, so, I'll take a step back. So, Samuel and I have known each other for 29 years. We were undergrads together at the University of California at Berkeley. By the way, that's the last time I'm gonna call him Samuel. Everyone calls him Chewy, based off his last name, Chewinga. And Samuel came to LA about 10 years ago to start his own brewery, which is now in its 7th year of operation in downtown Los Angeles, and that's Boomtown Brewery. And so since he and I have been friends for a long time, I was able to see Boomtown's journey from, you know, that idea into a lease, into the build out, into the first customers, and now, you know, they're celebrating 7 years of being open. So having witnessed all of that, you know, I was always dialoguing with Sam about, you know, what would you do different? You know, if you had a second crack at this, what might you do differently? Would you locate it somewhere else? You know, so it was as a result of those conversations where we just kind of kept ideating and ideating and ideating, and really wound up at something that I think addresses a lot of different things that are happening in the craft beer space as well as society overall. So where we're located in South Central, that is the poorest city council district in all of the entirety of the city of Los Angeles. Before COVID, 36% of the people there live below the federal poverty line. And my parents were actually both born and raised in South Central Los Angeles, and my dad was actually born literally 5 blocks away from where this brewery is going to be located. So from my perspective, this was an opportunity to bring craft beer, craft beverages to a place that had been traditionally excluded, from that. And if you look at a map of the city of Los Angeles, in the 3 city council districts that are in South Los Angeles, there is literally only one brewery in the entirety of South Los Angeles. And that's on the rapidly north side of South Los Angeles, which is rapidly gentrifying. So, you know, so if you look at the brewery map of LA, there's just this huge hole in it, you know, from the east of Inglewood and, you know, all the coastal cities until you get to, you know, past the, you know, the 710 freeway, essentially. There, you know, and below the 10 freeway, there are no breweries, you know, in this rectangular box. So we thought about a lot about what we wanted to do, who we wanted to hire, what we wanted to say. And so all of those things kind of culminated into arriving at this location.
So along with just opening a brewery, you're going to start a craft beverage incubator, production, and packaging facility. What are the opportunities that you see with opening that kind of incubator?
Well, I think, you know, if you really look at the beverage category, I mean, look, no one was talking about seltzer 4 years ago, and, you know, look at the percentage of the category that it is now. Then let's talk about Gen Z and what their taste preferences are, right? Much broader palette than my generation and the generations that even have come after me. Let's talk about cannabis and, you know, how that's going to affect the overall beverage category space, right? So for us, it was important not, you know, obviously we are a brewery and we have beer in the market, but for us, it was important to be nimble and to really acknowledge that I think these taste preferences are going to change rapidly over time. And we want to be able to ideate, you know what I mean, come up with new stuff on our own and innovate on our own, in addition to participating in whatever trends may come along in the category. So that, you know, I don't know if that explains it on the one half, you know, just in terms of product basis. But on the other hand, again, if we're talking about craft, we could talk about the dismal numbers of diversity in craft. And again, that's not just a craft beer problem, it's a specialty coffee association problem. It's a whole bunch of industries in which this is a problem. But this also allows us to create things and create, you know, beverages using flavors, using, you know, stuff that some people just may not be hip to, just based upon their upbringing and, you know, where they're from. So the whole idea is to really kind of use this space as an area in which people can have some fun and ideate and see, throw some stuff against the wall and see what sticks.
How soon do you think that you'll be pulling in other folks to jump in with those other ideas into that space?
I mean, when we open our doors, we'll be sitting on 10 to 12,000 barrels worth of capacity. And, People's Republic of South Central beer, we're we're not starting at that barrelage, in year 1, year 2, or year 3. So we're already out talking to people that either have, low volume product on the market and are looking to scale. Some brands that we've helped along the way. Chewy does a lot of consulting with other brands. So we're really looking to maximize our capacity as quickly as possible. So there'll be a lot of stuff coming out of our manufacturing facility that won't have our name on it. But just a lot of cool beverages, that are kind of like entering the market. So
the People's Republic already has some beer out in the market. Tell me what you've learned from those early batches and what the appetite is in that neighborhood for those beers.
Yeah, so we'll back up for a second. So the beers that we created, we did a series of 4 beer releases each quarter beginning in September of 2020, and we just had the final release in September of 2021. And so we did this for the purposes of establishing our brand, not only our name, but also who we are in terms of our core values as a company. So 100% of the net proceeds from the release of those 4 cans have gone towards buying Chromebooks for kids in South Los Angeles. And so this popped into my head when we were still in the middle of COVID and everyone was locked down at home. And there was a lot of LA Times articles about how kids had essentially gone missing from LAUSD. And a lot of the reasons those kids had gone missing is either they didn't have broadband at home, or they didn't have a computer at home, or they had multiple siblings. And if school's all at the same time, and you have 3 kids in the house, that means you need 3 computers with broadband access to accommodate all those kids learning. So we really set out to say, well, that's a really messed up situation. And obviously that's going to impact South Los Angeles a lot harder than other parts of the city. And it was hitting Black and brown communities particularly hard. So we were really out there trying to see, like, what's the solution to that? And these releases were our proposed solution, or just our efforts at, what we did is a small drop in the bucket, but, trying to say, like, this is what we stand for as a company. And we really want to be connected with our community and do good in our community. And it was important for us to not do that as, hey, here's a beer release and a portion of the proceeds. No, all proceeds. And hey, we're not just shuffling this through a nonprofit. No, this company is giving you this laptop, right?
That's really a wild concept that we haven't seen anybody else or very few have done. And I'm glad you brought up the One and Done series. So tell me a little more about how that went. How many Chromebooks were you able to give out?
We've given out over 30. I'm still sitting on 30 more. So we're waiting for to sell out of this final beer so we can, do our final tabulations and totals. But we're going to be giving out a lot more over this holiday period that we're just about to enter right now. So I'm really ecstatic. I mean, I've literally handed a Chromebook to each child, with our city councilman in the South Los Angeles area. So it's been a real kind of like, we brewed a beer, we bought these Chromebooks, and we're placing this thing in this young person's hands. And, I just really like the connection there. I'm looking forward to some young person walking into the brewery that I don't recognize 5 years from now and basically like, yeah, you gave me a Chromebook when I wasn't able to go online and get my schoolwork done. And I just think that's going to be the coolest, thing in the world. And maybe I'm just imagining that, but, I just really feel like we did it. It's a pain, you know what I mean? But we did it, and, there was a tangible benefit to the community. And I hope the community really understands and appreciates that. And we're looking forward to doing, even more incredible things once we open our doors. So.
Another way that you have made sure to connect with the community is you've stated some of your goals is to hire no fewer than 75% of your staff from the actual neighborhood and to give them a livable wage. How do you make that happen?
You know what? I think everything in life is just about intentionality. You know, the wage is a wage, right? And it doesn't do us any good to open up in this type of neighborhood and pay a wage that people can't live off of. You know, one of the things I don't talk about publicly is we're not doing tipping at this brewery. You know, tipping is a uniquely American thing. It started out of slavery. You know, you freed the Black people, and then they were like, "Well, we don't want to pay you, so let's just figure out how much. We'll leave it at our own discretion as to how much we want to pay, and ergo tipping." And I think, you know, if you listen to a lot of things that's going on in the restaurant business, you know, particularly as it, you know, cratered during COVID and now even coming back in COVID, how people don't want to work at these places, how there's just a tremendous amount of inequity between front of house staff and back of house staff. That's just not a vibe that we wanted to have at our brewery. We wanted to have a vibe in which people felt that they were getting paid a fair wage, in which we were able to offer them health care, so that we weren't the face of gentrification in our own neighborhood. We really wanted this to be a thing where if we hired enough people locally, that people could see a future for themselves locally and not get pushed out as home prices are ever increasing and housing prices are ever increasing. So
you also plan on becoming a certified B Corp. Why is that status so important to you?
Again, for us, you know, having a third party come and audit the things that I'm telling you right now, you know, I think that goes a long way, right? So to have the seal on the can and to say, like, you know, we've been audited, and the things that we said in terms of what we're trying to do with the community, what we're trying to do for the environment, you know, every 2 years I have to recertify and demonstrate that we actually are doing those things. I mean, you've heard the terms greenwashing, and now, you know, in this post 2020 world, there's, you know, a lot of people are suddenly woke. And so we just want to, you know, be able to say, hey, you know, look at the proof. And just like, you know, there are other breweries that are certified, you know, B corporations, and we'll have our audit report on our website. So, you know, people can come and see where their money's going and see, you know, what's actually happening.
Craig, I'm really excited for what you guys have going on. But when we talk next year at this time, where is the People's Republic of South Central and the South Los Angeles Beverage Company going to be?
You know, I still think we're going to be getting our beak wet, to be honest. I mean, you know, to open up a facility of this size, one of the things that's unique about this, we're the first brewery in the city of Los Angeles that's been allowed for outdoor amplified sound. And we're also permitted for 5 ticketed live shows a week at the brewery. So it's going to be a lot. You know, there'll be 3 cloud commercial kitchens on site. So we'll be, you know, operating 3 different restaurants. We'll be operating a live performance venue. There'll be a coffee roastery and retail coffee shop on site. So there's a lot of businesses that flow underneath the South Los Angeles Beverage Company umbrella. The People's Republic of South Central is just one of those things. We're also have a winery license, so we'll be doing our own ciders there under a different brand, as well as a lot of non-alcoholic beverages in the coffee and tea space. So for us, you know, we're not trying to do everything on day one. That's a recipe for disaster. But we're always going to be rolling out new things, new additions to our portfolio. So I think 6 months after we open, you know, I'm, you know, looking forward to what new thing that we'll have to add onto the pile. And that's what I want. I want people to come back and be like, you know, you didn't have this the last time. This is amazing. Or, you know, this is a whole new category that I didn't think you guys would be, you know, playing in. And again, that's the versatility. That's why we're South LA Beverage Company. You know, we really want to be able to play around in the space and see what really resonates with people.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you, Craig. Where can people find, I believe it's the Summoning IPA. Where can they find that right now?
Right now, we're just at some local shops in Southern California. High Low has us, Hank's Mini Market, which is on Florence near Crenshaw has it. And there's some other spots, but you can always go to our website, which is prscbrand.com, or any of our social media channels, which are at PRSC Beer. And we're always publishing where you can get it the latest. And then it's also on tap at Boulevard Market in Montebello, California.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time, Craig. And thanks for everyone for tuning in. Stay tuned for more Brewbound Live.
again. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final round of Brewbound's Pitch Slam 13 competition. I'm Ray Latif, the editor and producer of BevNet's Taste Radio podcast and the host of the Pitch Slam. This is the final round, as I mentioned, which once again is a one-of-a-kind business pitch competition that gives entrepreneurs behind the beer industry's next breakout brands an opportunity to sample their innovative products and showcase their business plans to our expert panel of judges. 6 brands from our semifinal round held yesterday have moved on to today's final round. Here are the rules. Today's contestants will have a whopping 4 minutes to deliver their pitches. If they attempt to go over their 4 minutes, they'll hear the dreaded gong. No one wants to hear that. Our judges will also have 4 minutes to ask questions and provide feedback. They have already sampled all the contestants' products. At the end of the competition, the entrepreneur with the best overall pitch and product will receive a $10,000 industry awareness package from Brewbound. The winning entrepreneurs will also receive a free entry into the 2022 Brewbound Live Conference. Let's meet or re-meet our judges. First up is Ryan Lake, who is a principal at Arlington Capital Advisors. Ryan has over 20 years of investment banking and commercial banking experience and has sourced, structured, and negotiated debt and equity transactions for beverage and restaurant companies. Up next is Malika Montero, who is the Executive Vice President and Chief Growth Strategy and Digital Officer for Constellation Brands. In her role, Malika is responsible for consumer and category insights, innovation, and new product development across beer, wine, and spirits, and the company's strategy, development, and business transformation functions. Next, we have Laura Markstein, who is the president of Markstein Sales Company, a 4th-generation woman-owned and operated wholesale beverage distributor based in Antioch, California. Markstein is now in its 102nd year of business and distributes over 4 million cases annually to 2,000 retailers in the Bay Area. And of course, we have Veronica Vega, who is the Director of Product Development for Deschutes Brewery, where she oversees new innovations, their pilot brewery, and barrel program. All right. All that being said, it's time to hear our first pitch for the final round of Brewbound Pitch Slam 13, and that is Donna Katz from G's Hard Ginger Beer. Donna?
G'day. My name is Donna, and I'm the founder of G's Dried Hard Ginger Beer in San Francisco Bay Area. I moved to Napa Valley in 2013, began dry farming a small block of grapevines organically by hand and making restrained-style wine. I started fermenting ginger for my own gut health, incorporating foraged and seasonal ingredients. Quickly came to realize I was making beverages I couldn't buy, ones that had no added sugar, craft with only real ingredients, and that just made me smile. Then the Aussie in me was like, well, why isn't there any alcohol in this tasty beverage? With superfood having proven ginger benefits and consumers wanting cleaner alcohol options to support their active and healthier lifestyles, I saw a problem, found a solution, and totally rolled up my sleeves. First to market in 2018 with a new category of ginger-based beverages, G's shelf-stable brews combine fruits, flowers, citruses, botanicals, and spices that are absurdly aromatic, tasty and refreshing, and that keep you feeling great with none of the sugar highs and lows, because we ferment to bone dry and don't add any sugar or artificial sweeteners. So why now, and what do we know about the US beverage alcohol consumer? What we know is that approximately 70% of men and only 30% of women drink beer. They're not shocking stats, but what that really means is that 50% of the adult drinkers in this country do not drink beer, and they've been itching for alternatives, especially women. Mostly, we all just want to fit in. At every occasion, G's is beyond beer. Ready to drink, ready to mix, ready to pair. Superb standalone and food-friendly, or the ultimate aromatic and clean canvas for any cocktail. And if you're anything like me, both. Mostly, we all just want to fit in, like I said. Fun fact about ginger, it ranks 3rd as the most ginger beer, I should say. It ranks 3rd as the most popular cocktail mixer in the United States. So where is G's at? As a one-gal band, I humbly take pride in having built these solid relationships to date. And our quality beverages are speaking for themselves. Our traction compelling, our velocities growing. Consumers agree. Unsolicited media agrees. And industry buyers see it too. In the words of our target buyer, G's represents a new category. It's what consumers will want next. It's specialty 2.0. More and more eyes are pointing to the specialty category, and just like big wine opened the door to crafted wines and big beer to craft beer, so too is big specialty, and now we're seeing a keen shift to craft specialty. Wellness is a hot commodity, and G's is positioned in the fastest growing RTD category. We're awakening the $1.6 billion sleepy household category of ginger beer and doing it in a cleaner and better for our planet way. Because quality ingredients matter, transparency and sustainability matters, regenerative farming and farm workers matter, and our next generation matters. So is this a scalable model? It sure is. Ginger has gone from exotic to mainstream and proudly holds its place in many ingredients in non-alcoholic as well as beverage alcohol brands. Just think about what you buy. We've got our eyes on thoughtful growth, and the other half of that equation is supply chain. Demand for ginger as well as supply, both imports and processing, are seeing compounding year-on-year growth, which is really the best of both worlds. And our other ingredients are appealing, accessible, and available, making scalability possible and real. And in today's supply chain constrained environment, that's especially important. We would love to find strategic partnership. This brand has a lot to learn. I have a lot to learn. But we also have a lot to offer. I'm a big believer it's not about who gets a bigger slice of the pie, it's about how we all make our pie bigger. And we can. Winning this competition would positively change this brand's trajectory, and I'm even more energized thinking about what lies ahead and building a culture where everyone's pies get bigger and we work, play, and feel great about ourselves, and personally and professionally. The horizon ahead for G's is pretty. We're building something that's got spirit, tenacity,
Well done. Please stay on stage. The judges may have some questions for you. Outstanding. Well done. We can slide a little bit closer. They're not going to bite. I hope not, anyway. Fantastic stuff. Laura, obviously we didn't hear from you yesterday. Would love to hear your initial thoughts. You know, and Donna talked about seeing a problem and creating a solution through G's. Not necessarily a problem, but do you see an opportunity for ginger beer to be a big category in the United States?
Can you hear me? Okay, good. Actually, I loved your product. I thought it had super clean ingredients. All the attributes were well designed on the can. And it may just be my older eyes that had a little difficulty reading the ingredients. So that would just be a suggestion. But I think that there's a great opportunity because of the attributes and the clean ingredients. I think there's a place for your product or your brand. Love it.
Malika, we heard more about scaling from Donna today. What do you think about the scaling strategy that she outlined for G's?
I think it's really smart. The question I have, Donna, you tell such a compelling story. You bring so much energy to what you're building, and it is first to market. All of the attributes, I think, connect with consumers. We heard a lot today about the better for you space and how important that is. My question for you is how, beyond package and beyond that great billboard effect you showed in your images, how are you telling that story to consumers and bringing them into the brand, knowing that this is on the slightly different track of what's happening in alternative adult beverages?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's still very much a work in progress. I am the entire complement of Team G's. So it's working now on what building a team, building a culture looks like, and answering those questions or discovering more around those people and the occasions that these people want to drink it at. And we do want to all fit in. And I feel like a lot of places you go, you see 22 tap handles, and one is allocated to Beyond Beer. And 50% of the people that walk through that door are Beyond Beer. So potentially more than 50%, because it's not saying that the people that drink beer won't drink something else as well. And so I think some of the education is coming through the broader category as well. And I plan on wanting to try and find more of that, hone in more on that message, and look also vision longer term of beyond dry hard ginger beer, what this lifestyle brand could offer to continue to speak to people that are looking for something that speaks to them.
Great, thank you.
Ryan, we heard Donna talk about aligning with strategics, and given the foundation that we've seen over the last couple of days, do you see strategics as looking for a brand like G's today and in the future?
Yeah, I could. I think strategics are always looking for something that's new, something disruptive, something that gives them an entry in a new category, or something that it breaks through in a category that's already established. I think it's the little pieces of proving out velocity in certain key chains, key regions, figuring out where this goes on the shelf, where you get the benefit of the velocity of a hard seltzer or a beer, but you're differentiated, and not getting yourself relegated to the part of the store where the velocity is going to be more like a traditional non-alcoholic ginger beer.
Veronica, we also saw a lot more retailers on a slide today as well, which it sounds like the concept is proving itself out. But I wonder, is that something you look at and say, okay, yes, they've got this good base from which to build on, or is it just they need to keep growing in different retailers to really stand out at this point?
Yeah, I'm wondering, since it is retail driven, how you will incorporate consumer feedback on flavor and your future flavor development. Because as we've heard from others today, you have 6 months on the shelf to prove whether something's working or not, and so stuff has to happen in the background in order to get that feedback and get that confidence to that retailer that, no, I've done the work to get consumers and get their feedback on flavor. So I'm curious what your plan is there.
Yeah, again, comes back to building a team of with people that can focus on some of those things as well, and I see that as imperative. I've been working on the foundations of product and brand and getting into the locations that we've been at right now, and looking now to bring on a salesperson that can help to drive more of the demand side of the equation, as well as some support in the marketing/branding world that can really look into some of the data and analysis and help us to funnel to this place of being able to communicate, being able to talk, being able to connect more with those consumers.
Great stuff. All right, great start to the show. Thanks so much. All right, up next, we have the founders of Funky Town Brewery, Rich Bloomfield, Greg Williams, and Zach Day. All right, your clicker's here. Just please mind your timer.
Hello again, my name is Rich, and these are my brothers, Greg and Zach. We are the owners of Funky Town Brewery, the newest, freshest, funkiest black-owned brewery in Chicago. So why the name Funky Town? Growing up, we always used the phrase, keep it funky, with me, meaning be truthful and keep it authentic in communication. The word funky itself is a synonym for groovy, dope, cool, fire, lit, all positive descriptors. And everyone knows the addictive, feel-good song, Funky Town, across generations and race. The feel, the vibe, the meaning of the word has a positive, fun connotation, which is our brand starting point. Town represents the community that ties it all together. Our first logo, we never really liked it, didn't fall in love with it, but it represents that raw, do-it-yourself nature of homebrewing. So we use that design on our homebrew bottles and started getting our name out there into the community we want to target. Once we had the opportunity to go pro, we contracted the services of Creative Juice, a black woman, millennial-owned creative agency in Atlanta, Georgia. We want to be intentional with diversity and inclusion when looking for partners to assist in executing our strategy and creating a real story that the community can believe in. In 2020, we joined Chaos Brew Club. This enabled us to integrate ourselves in the Chicago home brewing community and scale up our batches so that we could provide more samples for feedback. We were also able to network with local breweries to gain insight into the profession and gain understanding of the brewing process on the professional equipment.
Shout out to Isbuzz Brewing.
We use homebrew as an opportunity to gather feedback from black people, women, and other minorities to see what smells and tastes they thought were palatable. The feedback we were able to gather from these underserved groups drives our approach for brewing and branding. This also served as promotion for our brand launch. On October 2nd, 2021, Funky Town Brewery launched with 2 beers, provided jerk chicken appetizers, gave away branded bags, glassware, t-shirts, magnets, stickers, and information postcards. We had over 200 people attend this event, with over 85% being from the black and brown community. This was our first opportunity to validate our proof of concept and show that black and brown people, women, and minorities will congregate around beer if the message resonates and they see themselves in the product.
These beers were specifically designed, created, and homebrewed to meet the needs of the first-time craft beer drinker. On one end, we're offering an entirely different world to the people within our culture, and on the other, we're offering an entirely different culture in the beer world. In the last 60 days of launch, we've released 4 beers in the market, with each gradually getting darker in color and introducing them to new beer styles with low bitterness and low astringency. All of our beers are brewed starting at 5.5%, making it so you can enjoy more than one. We used a variety of different references for label designs, including our love for hip-hop on our Hip Hops and R&B Brew, our woo-wop the bam, a phrase only used in Chicago to skip unnecessary details during conversation. Cuffing season, a multicultural term used for temporary relationships in a cold winter months from October to February, right? Finally, our newest release, New Year, Who Dis, is dedicated to everyone with dreams of knocking those New Year resolutions out the park. All of our cans have small write-ups on the back to let the drinker know what we're about and what we stand for. These different styles enable us to have a competitive price point that doesn't turn someone away, but provides every entry point for clients and beer consumers.
Our partnership with Pilot Projects enables us to focus on branding, marketing, and sales. We reach out to the underserved community for feedback on our beer styles. We have hosted pop-up tasting events, collaborated with Black local craft beer influencers to assist with educating entry-level beer drinkers and maintain those long-lasting relationships through consistent interaction. We target retailers in underserved areas to alleviate the
Please grab your mic. Excellent work. Let's see what the judges think, if they have any questions for you, comments. Veronica, let's start with you, actually. You know, I'm sure you've seen a lot of startup breweries come to market, and we saw one that's a strategy that's outlined for Funky Town. You know, what do you think about their foundation, their process for building this, getting this off the ground?
I mean, my favorite thing is that you're customer focused, right? So right from the get-go, you were getting feedback from your customers and bringing them into your plan. I'm super curious, like, were there surprises as to like, oh, I think we should be brewing this, but then my customers said, you know, led me in a different direction. Were there any surprises with that interaction that you had?
Well, that's what the home brewing sampling project was for, like to get that feedback from folks. So the stuff that they might not have liked, some of the stuff that they did, maybe the flavors that they did, but overall, everyone is basically saying like, yeah, we love this. I know somebody who doesn't drink beer that would drink this. So the purpose of it was to get somebody who's entry level, or maybe even pass it on to somebody who hasn't even drinking beer before, to come in and welcome themselves to Funky Town. So yeah, through the home brewing sampling campaign, we were able to do that launch. When we scaled up, it just blew up from there.
Yeah, I want to add that through the home brewing campaign and hitting these underserved markets, one of the main pieces of feedback we got is that IPA was almost like a bad word. So we focused on like more palatable styles, so like, you know, they don't have that hesitancy with our beers. So that's kind of how we approach it.
Very cool.
Interesting. Laura?
Yeah, guys, there's a reason why you're standing up here. First and foremost, the quality of the beer, it's really good. I really enjoyed it. The packaging, fantastic. Love your personality. I can feel it, see it in the product. I just want to know your aspirations. Is it a brew house? Is it Chicago? Are you going to take on the world? I mean, what do you want to do with this beer?
Yeah, we have big aspirations, but I think just following the stories of other breweries around the country, we first need to focus on home and make sure we build a relationship with Chicago so that if we expand in the market, we have somewhere we can retract if anything happens. We want to have a brew pub, a nice design space where we can have events there and just create different experiences for people that drink the Funky Town beer. As we're contracting now, we work with different pop-ups, different organizations to just create a different experience with our beer at the center for these different communities.
Yeah, we've definitely reached out to different genders, races, ethnicities, and just had events just to experience the Funky Town beer, and everyone loved it. So we're just going to consistently target those markets, appreciate, you know, the craft beer enthusiasts as well. Like, they're going to appreciate our product as well. But at the same time, you know, just make sure we focus on home, the underserved communities, and just, you know, pretty much have our beer in those deserts and, you know, in Black Chicago.
Malika, you heard the 2-minute pitch yesterday, the 4-minute pitch today. Anything that you didn't hear that you wanted to ask the guys about in terms of their strategy and go-to-market strategy?
Well, I think that song is going to be stuck in my head for the rest of the day. I'm Chicago-based, so I'd love to come say hi. But one question for you. I loved the comment you made about bringing a different perspective to the beer industry and bringing new drinkers and introducing them to beer. I love that give and take. And your focus on retailers in underserved areas. Curious how much of a sell it has to be when you talk to those retailers if they're not seeing beer and craft beer flying off their shelves. What's your pitch to them for why they should keep your product?
Well, our pitch to them is, we actually focus on that community slide to kind of show them like the groundswell of support that we've gotten. We're all from the area, so we're able to kind of craft a local story that they believe. We can talk about the velocity, how each barrel that we have brewed since we've launched has sold out, has pushed to market within 1 week. But, honestly, if we're going to these craft beer deserts, it's going to take some time and some conditioning, and that's kind of what we're here for. We might not get them on the first try, but second and third, let's go consistent, we'll get them.
We're pretty much out of time, so I just want to make sure that Ryan gets his comments in. Ryan, from a funding standpoint, what are some of the things that really interested you? What are some of the things that might give you pause?
Yeah, I mean, 2 comments from me. First of all, I love the local focus. Beer historically is a local product for decades and decades, so the more you can dig in deep in Chicago, I think is the best for you, it's best for the brand, best for the community. And I think secondly, the one thing I would challenge you with is your packaging is fantastic. I think your challenge will be to find a way to make the packaging still pop, but also have a cohesive sort of look, so when it's on the shelf, everyone knows it's Funky Town right away.
Outstanding. Unfortunately, we're out of time. We've got to move on. But thank you so much. Well done. Well done. Take your microphone.
Thank you.
All right, good stuff. Up next, Agustin Ruelas from Brujeria. Come on up to the stage. A freshly sanitized microphone. Fantastic. Well done.
Hello.
That's for everyone. One more time.
Hello, everyone. I'm Agustin Ruelas from Brujeria Company. I'm one of the co-founders and co-owners. We actually opened in November 2019 in Pico Rivera, about 23 miles southeast of here. So Brujeria is actually a Spanglish word. The English word of brew, obviously, and then brujeria in Spanish is actually witchcraft. So we kind of wanted to combine those words, make it easy for the consumer to see that it is a Latino-owned brand. And we are Latino-owned business. We were started with family and friends. We target a very specific niche. So we do go towards Latinos, nonprofit professionals, socially conscious consumers, and just craft beer enthusiasts in general. So our logo is also one of those things where people ask, like, well, what is that, right? So for us, literally, it's looking the top view of a boiling batch of beer. So, but we did make it, intentionally kind of, weird and kind of, people ask questions about it. We always leave it up for interpretation. The most popular one is actually Joy Division's album, Unknown Pleasures. I don't know if people are familiar. But, that's part of what Brujeria is. It's a swirling chemistry of ideas, language, culture, science, and spirituality intertwined in wonder and community. And why did we choose Pico Rivera? We wanted to be in a majority Latino community. If we had not bootstrapped this venture, we would have been probably closer to downtown because that's where we did all of our nonprofit events as we were coming up. But, it is 90% Latino, and LA County as a whole is 48% Latino, so we do feel like putting out the brand out this way as a Latino brand, like we can certainly capture a good market. Sorry. So we have put out several beers. Over the last year, we did put out a series. We called it the Los Trabajadores series or the Workers series. We focused on worker justice, and so we actually brewed about over 40 barrels of beer over the last year. We are a very small brewery, only a 5-barrel system, so we can only do so little at a time, and we were mobile canning too, so it was, very cost prohibitive for us. But still, over the last year, we did sell over 40 barrels of this beer and actually donated over $10,000 to local nonprofits that work with these workers. All the labels have information about where that money was going, and for the most part, it was for pandemic relief because a lot of people were out of work last year. So that was part of our way of helping out the community. We are very hyper-local, so we know that, really the city of Pico Rivera is where we're focusing, but also the surrounding communities because they're also majority Latino, and there is a burgeoning craft scene in that area. It's just in the last 2 weeks, we've had 2 soft openings of more Latino-owned breweries within 10 miles of us. We are very community-oriented. We've donated to over 40 nonprofits between 2015 and 2019. It was all nonprofit-based and homebrew. It was homebrew. Excuse me. And then also we've started doing some local distribution. So in order for us to do the mobile canning, we have to, produce so much or can so much so that we can actually make it work. So we have actually gotten into very small local craft beer stores, over 30 in the LA area, and actually in Orange County as well. And actually, as I speak right now, we are breaking in our very own canning line. So our goal is to now start moving out, branching out a little bit further. I mean, we are very LA specific for now, but hopefully with, a new canning line and more, bringing in salespeople, or probably myself doing it, we can maybe get a little bit further. But for us, Brujeria is brewing quality ales with culture and community as key ingredients. Thank you.
Well done. Great job. Let's move over here. Yeah. Ryan, we heard a lot more, saw a lot more today. Hyperlocal is a word that I don't think we saw on the slide yesterday. Scaling hyperlocal, what do you think of the strategy outlined by Brujeria?
Yeah, I love the strategy. I think hyperlocal makes so much sense. I think especially for beer being a perishable product, and I think the connections you are making and can make in the community, I think staying super local makes a lot of sense. I would encourage you not to go too far outside LA too quickly because this market is just so big and there's so much opportunity here. If you can tap just a fraction of that, the sky's the limit.
Thank you.
Veronica, aligning package with mission, with focus. Do you see it? Do you see it on for what's happening with Brujeria?
Yeah, that's a question I have on when you go from people coming to your house and they know where you live, and so they're not questioning the brand. But if you're moving from there to retail, are there things you're thinking about in getting the brand Brujeria more front and center, and also getting your cause marketing more communicative on the package?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we are working on that, right? Again, because of the pandemic is why we started packaging. That was not part of our plans for the first couple of years. So we were kind of pushed into it, and I mean, luckily we do have a very good graphic designer. And actually the labels for the Trabajadores was Lalo Alcaraz, who's a very famous Latino cartoonist. But yeah, we definitely, are still working on the labeling and really the brand itself. I mean, we're still very young.
Laura, it's outlined right here. Brewing quality ales with culture and community as key ingredients. It's a great statement. Is that what your customers are looking for?
I absolutely loved your packaging, loved the messaging around it. Curious, are you going to focus on single serves? Are you going to potentially do a 12-pack where that messaging can really convey community and key ingredients? I mean, what is your plans for that?
I don't know. You know what? I mean, yeah, we just literally are starting up the canning line today. But it is a 16-ounce, so it's going to be 4 packs. I think just, building relationships, again, like nearby. I mean, yeah, only 30 stores in like a 15-mile radius. So, yeah, it's definitely, building more relationships, getting the brand out there more, and really getting more people to come to our place so they can see it for themselves. Because it is very difficult to explain, like, what you see when you come to the brewery, especially even the people behind the bar, right? Like, it's not a typical look when you visit a brewery in LA, right? Or really most places.
Yeah, and a quick question. Like I said, I love the front of the packaging, but you chose to put your brewery name on the back, and I had a little difficult time trying to locate that. Where did it go? Why isn't it front and center? Is there some rationale behind that?
No. I wish our graphic designer was here. Honestly, I give him a lot of leeway.
Okay.
He's a great artist. He came to us before we ever opened our doors. But really, it's just about learning, right? So we really don't know how to do this yet, and we're trying to figure it out. So yeah, I do think that we need to be more front and center about who we are.
Yeah, and the high ABV. I think one of them I tasted was an 8.2. So thank you for a good night's sleep. I appreciate that.
Thank you, guys.
Malika, between the two presentations we heard, anything come up in this one that you had questions about, comments, concerns?
No new questions, but I think what it reinforced for me is how rooted and important community and the consumers you're talking to are. And as you think about expansion, even in this area, your consumers can be your advocates. They're your best marketing tool to really drive that conversation, to drive trial, to introduce the brand within their friends and neighbors. And I encourage you to really lean on that, because that can be a really powerful force for you.
Yeah. All right, fantastic feedback. Thank you so much. Augustine, I just need my sheet. Sorry about that. I just need my sheet. Yeah. I have a pretty good memory, just not that good. So, all right. Up next is Youngwon Lee from Doke Beer. Youngwon, come on up. Thank you.
Do I just press this?
Timer and your timer.
All right. Hi, I'm Youngwon Lee. I'm founder of Doke Beer. I've been in the alcohol industry over 10 years, and I've been to a lot of beer festivals, and what I've noticed over and over was that I was the only Asian guy pouring beer at the event, like today. But it was a positive thing, and I thought I was always the unique one. So when I decided to start my own brand, I thought being more original and true to myself would actually make us stand out and differentiate us and bring something new to the market. Our name comes from the Korean mythical creature Dokkaebi that love to eat, drink, and have fun with people, and they're wonders and shapeshifters. So we travel around, partner with local breweries, and we took the same shape-shifting approach, and we create a series of experimental beers, trying out different ingredients and flavors. Thanks to the judges last year, we've taken some good feedback and upgraded our visuals from the left being very super minimal to something that's more straightforward with real ingredients in there. And if you look closely, there, Dokkaebi is hiding in the middle. And this is our creative outlet. This is our experimental batch. And this is our sort of finding our own way of product market fit. And we hear the feedback and people love it. Then we redesign the package and refine the recipe and add it to our core brew lineup. So since then, we have 10 beers on our core line. And thankfully, we got some international design awards, as well as beer competition recognition. And these 4 core beers are our best sellers at the moment. So we have a Pilsner made with the bamboo leaves. We have a kettle sour. We pulled a culture from kimchi. We added chili powder and ginger in there. We have a blonde ale with the yuzu, Asian citrus. And we have a milk stout with cardamom and peppercorn. So these are the beers that we want to take it to the next level, and that's something that we will try to scale and produce in higher volume so we could actually distribute nationally. And we take an Asian approach to our beer, but if you could look it over here, this is a LA Beer Festival that happened 2 months ago here, and with over 6,000 attendees, and we have a mainstream appeal, and we were the most popular brewery and most creative brewery at the event. So it was a good feeling coming out of pandemic and then kind of seeing that our proof of concept is actually working, and we have a lot of followers coming here. In terms of our distribution, we're available diverse on and off-premise channels. So from local grocery stores to Bevmo to Asian retailers that never sold craft beer before. This is a good example of a Korean supermarket sponsored by Coca-Cola. That refrigerator holds 13 cases of our 16 ounces. And because we're the exclusive craft beer there, we actually move 2 to 4 times the regular volume at our regular sort of beer-focused accounts. Because the funny thing is craft beer is a huge market, but yet no one is marketing to us 19 million Asian Americans in the States. So we want to grow in this sector. And we're always, I think, being deeply rooted into our local community is really important for us. So we do collaborate with the local nonprofits, and we sometimes pull out all of our recipes, put it into a special release so that we could, contribute to the local community. And this was part of it as well. There was a Korean movie that won a lot of Oscars this year, and that movie is about a Korean, immigrant life, and it really touched my heart. So I decided to make a beer that's dedicated for this movie to really tell the story further. So we use water celery, which is the Minari, the title of the movie, and we use a seed from it, and we added lemon and lime on it, and made a wheat beer out of it to represent sort of the bitter life and then the bright future that we dream about. Because it all starts with the seed, an idea, a starting point, a beginning of something great. So please join me, and let me take you on a journey to the Far East. Thank you.
All right. All right. Laura, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on the taste, the packaging of Doke beer?
First of all, I love your enthusiasm. I love your connection to community. This was probably the most unique that I sampled and have looked at. And just curious, with a product like this, is it just going to be focused in Asian markets? Is there, is your idea to expand beyond that? And how do you bring in that consumer that doesn't understand some of these ingredients and the attributes of your product?
Do we have the microphone on?
I think the craft beer industry, the consumers are always open to trying new flavors. So I think we're received pretty well. We're also available at local supermarkets like Guz's Market. We're available in about 200 locations right now, and I think 80% are actually the regular craft beer industry. And the Asian community is supportive, but it does have a higher learning curve. They've never sold craft beer before. It's more of a Asian version of Budweiser, Katz, Qingdao, Kite. So there's a learning curve. It takes me about 6 months of a sales cycle to get in. But once they get in, they love it. They come to me, hey, am I actually selling really well? I just sold like 20 cases. Can you come here and then fill up the refrigerator? Some of our accounts, they don't even know what's in the refrigerator. And we just go in there and fill it up because they love it. But I think it appeals to the both community because for existing beer market, it's finally like something that's new and that's perceived as something innovative. And I think as you taste it, and I think we're hitting the right notes in terms of the regular beer drinkers and kind of exploring and take a journey through the flavors.
Veronica, Playful Brews Unforgettable Taste. Unforgettable Taste is great. Playful also helps to sell product as well. Do you see the playfulness outlined here on the packaging, or does it need to be up, increased, decreased a little bit?
Yeah, I think I got that definitely from the pitch more, where you're taking the story of shape-shifting and making that the core of what inspires your next flavor. I'm curious how you will, I guess from like a marketing perspective, like it seems like your customer is going to be a very curious person, someone who's willing to take risks on flavors or ingredients that they might not have heard of. How are you going to keep them, engaged and able to find you?
So a lot of our customers, they come to our website, and then when they get it, they do a variety pack. So the variety pack actually has every single flavor that are available at the moment, and then they take the journey and then kind of find their own favorites, and then when they come back again, they go for their favorites. And because our sort of that experimental beer is our test for finding our product market fit, so a lot of times when we add to these core lineup, these are the ones that we actually already received feedback and went through a couple of batches, and that are sort of our proven flavors.
Malika, the addressable market, I think that Young Wan outlined was tens of millions of Americans, Asian Americans, that the beer industry is not addressing, not reaching. Can Doke beer not only reach those folks, do you think, but folks beyond that ethnic group?
Absolutely. I think we've been talking about inclusivity and diversity this week, and so much of that is reflecting the people you want to bring into the industry, reflecting the people you want to bring into your brand through how you talk to them and the ingredients you use. And I think Doke beer does exactly that. And I said yesterday, I love this idea of global and local that the brand is bringing to life. That's an immigrant story that is uniquely American. It certainly speaks to Asian consumers, but I think it speaks to what America is about. You had that in some of your marketing material, and I think the connection is there. It's that storytelling and continued repetition of bringing people in that'll be important for scale.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, we only have a few seconds left, but you get the last word on Doke beer.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, I think you know this, but be careful going national too quickly. I think, if you could seed the Bay Area correctly, where the Asian accounts, the consumers pull it into the mainstream accounts, and you build a really good market there, I think that'll naturally pull you into the right other markets. But just be careful to do that at the right time.
Okay. All right, great feedback. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, up next we have Cove Hard Yerba Mate. The founders are Alex Montalbano, Josh Mackler, and Ryder England. Come on up to the stage. All right. Your clicker's here, and please just mind your timer.
Inspired by yerba mate's first cultivators, the Guarani, we named our company Cove, which translates to the art of living. Hard seltzers and hard kombuchas have created categories of their own, following better-for-you non-alcoholic trends in the market. And yerba mate has been sweeping the nation with leading brands like Guayaki, who just reported $96 million in sales in 2020, which was a 14% growth increase over the previous year. So, spotting that gap in the market, we decided to create the world's first hard yerba mate.
Our product is simple: organic, vegan, and gluten-free, while crafted to be low sugar, low calories, and low carbs. We craft brew yerba mate sourced directly from organic certified farms in South America, and we use a natural fermentation process of yeast and sugarcane to produce our crushable and uplifting hard yerba mate beverages. We only use the best high-quality ingredients to craft our products, while staying away from natural flavors and fake sweeteners. We also aren't counting calories, and we aren't concerned with being zero sugar. We believe the best flavor and drinking experience will come from using raw and real ingredients, and we think you will too. We are passionate about showing people a more uplifting and inviting drinking experience for alternative beverages, and our passion for making our product this way extends into how we operate every single part of our business as well.
There we go. As storytellers and creatives, we really lean into our retail marketing. We built our own handmade tasting room in Barrio Logan and have 2 more coming up, literally creating community projects out of all of this. And I'd say that it's going pretty well so far. We've had over 30 plus publications in just the past 6 months, and I think it's safe to say that Cove is just getting started.
Speaking of getting started, we started in San Diego growing our local market with self-distribution. We bought a van. We did everything ourselves. And we're currently available now in Northern California, Oregon, Nevada, and we're launching Arizona, Colorado, Wyoming, Washington, and Idaho over the next couple quarters. It may be seeming pretty quick, but launching during COVID, during the holidays, we had to expand outside of our own home market until we finally outgrew distribution by ourselves, our self-distribution, which we're happy to say that we just did. So we're launching in San Diego locally with a large distributor. We have a 25,000 square foot facility in San Diego where we just upgraded our equipment, allowing us to quadruple our annual capacity to about 10,000 barrels plus per year. We will be launching with variety packs and color blocking cartons that will align with our cans, and we can't wait to share that with you guys soon. We've also been approved in multiple states with larger retailers like Sprouts and Total Wine, and we can't wait to get on the shelves there and show that our product does well in grocery and not just in the smaller, hyper-local groceries and retailers that we're currently in.
This is the team that got us here, but it's really experiences like this and people like yourself that are going to elevate this brand farther than we could ever imagine. Come support your own art of living, and don't forget to party and plant responsibly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's head over and hear from the judges. Ryan, one of the slides earlier talked about the traction we're seeing for yerba mate and non-alc. Is that an easy comparison? I mean, can we assume that there'll also be interest for yerba mate in alcoholic beverages as well?
There could be. I mean, it's hard to say until you actually get a lot of traction, a lot of market proof. But they're certainly seeing non-alc categories going to alc. We've seen vice versa. So there's a lot of interest from a lot of different people of can you translate things across alc and non-alc. So it's a possibility.
Malika, what do you think about the tasting room strategy that Covey has created at this point?
We were talking yesterday about the barrier of just not knowing the ingredients and the barrier of needing to educate consumers, and tasting rooms do such a nice job of that because you get to try the product, you get to hear the story, and really feel the energy for not just the ingredients, but also how it's made and what inspired the team. So I think that's smart. It's not necessarily scalable, but it's smart as you're starting to build your brand. One of the questions I had was around, we were talking earlier, Mary and Jason talked about how important it is to really understand your customer and to be able to show retailers the need that you're filling. We've talked a lot about what you were inspired by and the product and the ingredients. We haven't talked really about who your customer is. There's certainly a better for you strategy that comes through, but could you provide a little bit more context on who you're going after?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly follow the health and wellness kind of category, right? Of course, with the benefits of yerba mate and also just kind of the organic and low sugar, low cal. Like Josh said, we weren't chasing stats, but we got them, which was great. Also, kind of treating the active lifestyle, and really something that hasn't been tapped into too much is the creative market. Everyone talks about action sports and this living and activity, but they really don't talk about the creatives that are really driving an industry, and really, like, everyone can see themselves in that. But focusing actually pretty hyper local, but more in a grassroots format. Like we do work with local nonprofits, and we really like show up and put our hands in the dirt, as we like to say. So yeah, I think it's important to show physical face, and really allow people to trust your consumer, and that's why we put our plants on our can, so they can see those ingredients and be like, oh, that's what a passion fruit looks like, and really relate to it.
Thank you.
And the art of living, like Ryder said, it kind of means something different to everyone. It's unique to every person. So like whether that was building the tasting room with your bare hands, where we could get a consultant out, and when we needed help, he called his friends. So for me, it's spending the day with my kids and watching them learn something new. But those are the kind of people that we're targeting to.
Thank you.
Laura, I heard a few folks talk about how Covey, they can definitely see Covey at a Whole Foods. That's possible. Could you also see Covey at a Total Wine, at a Bevmo, at places that are large liquor retailers, large beer distributors, beers retailers?
I do. I think that there's an absolute need for this product. I think it's hot right now. I don't know who did your packaging, but it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, it was one of the prettiest packages that I've seen with the botanicals and flowers on there. Another thing that I really liked is that you gave an explanation of every single attribute that product had. So it's pretty easy to pick up a can and say, okay, this is really going to be great for me. I'm so thrilled that you're heading into a less self-distribution and joining the 3-tier system. But I would just say, as you're going into those stores and going into a wholesale distribution system, is educating, because not everybody knows this product. A lot of us do, but not everybody does. So really have that in line where you can train those frontline salespeople and do the best you can with education. But beautiful job, great tasting.
Can I touch on that real quick?
We're just about out of time, so I just want to make sure we get to Veronica. Veronica, final thoughts on Covey?
I'm wondering, now that you do have a tasting room, do people who come there, do they know mate, or are you educating them there in that space? Because I'm wondering, between hard tea and yerba mate, there is an education. I'm a mate drinker, but some folks don't know what it is.
I think it's definitely been an education piece, kind of in both ways. I kind of, identify it as close to green tea, and, helping people get it from there is, gets them pretty organically to, understanding what it is. I think there's a lot more education in understanding the kind of qualities of, how mate has been, more based in an energy drink based on, the non-alcoholic stuff. When you're really brewing it, it's not necessarily built with that much caffeine. It's actually more of a lighter brew, kind of like a green tea. So I think that's definitely been a thing.
Good stuff.
Yeah, educating people on the fact
Unfortunately,
it's sessionable.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. I got to cut you off.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry. Well done. Great feedback.
Thank you so
Great
much.
presentation. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Our final presenter for the final round is Tommy Arthur from Charisma Tea Company. Tommy?
Gotcha, brother. First and foremost, thanks to Brewbound and Ray and John and everybody else for the opportunity to be up here. The judges, thanks for having me back. It's kind of exciting to stand up here for the next 4 minutes, and I'm really worried about the 5 minutes over there, but let's rock and roll and go for it. Have you ever met a charismatic person, dare I say a leader even? They're the kind of individual that delights the senses, captivates an audience, and naturally leads by example. Pretty sure everyone in this room knows a few of those people in their lives. We believe our Charisma Hard Tea is poised to be a leader in the emerging hard tea category. With everyone asking what comes after seltzer, it's obvious the answer will be hard tea, and we think this brand can be a larger player in the better-for-you space. How could a brand possibly know this? A new one at that. And isn't it a bold statement? Well, of course it is. But for the past 2 years, we've been beta testing these flavors in our tasting rooms and watching firsthand new consumers engage the teas we created. Sampling customers in this way confirmed that Charisma has broad appeal. From non-beer drinkers to wine aficionados and even the most hardcore I only drink IPA people, every step along the way, we've encountered favorable reception. Our customers tell us they love Charisma Hard Tea, and they want to know the next tea brand when it's coming out. It's very simple. They're expecting new and bold flavors. As you can see, it checks all the better-for-you boxes, including the super elusive Soccer Mom Certified. Being from San Diego, we know that it tastes great at the beach. Charisma is equally adept at hanging out in the sun or the shade. And obviously, Charisma loves to kick it poolside and will always be down for lounging around. Perhaps you're an influencer and you're attracted to pretty things. Don't worry, we've got this. And lastly, Charisma always seeks out adventure and is ready for whatever life throws its way. Each of these slides I presented has been presented with pretty pictures to stimulate the dreamer in you. That is how I see our brand. But what about the economics of it all? Well, welcome to my friend White Space, a seemingly vast and land filled with tons of opportunity. Here's a quick view of the industry for those of you not living the 30,000-foot dream of what hard tea can be. Currently in scan data, hard tea sells about $400 million a year. The top 4 brands control 93% of the total units sold. Where once there was no hard anything categories, we now have hard seltzer, hard coffees, and even hard energy drinks. These are all very new and recent category disruptions. But what if I reminded you that hard tea has been around for 20 years? How crazy is it to think that Twisted Tea was launched by Boston Beer back in 2001? Yet for the last 20 years, the hard tea category has lacked any real innovation. Many of the top flavors are black tea based with a twist of lemon. Our hard Charisma teas were purposely built with what's next in mind. They're gluten-free, agave-based, low-calorie, and of course, delicious. There is nothing shy or same about them. Still, brands need to be built, scaled, and launched. I don't have to tell anyone watching this broadcast, those propositions cost money. So we decided to come to Brewbound Pitch Slam to see what's out there. We have built an amazing set of flavors and developed a brand identity, but investment to scale in this space is king. Everyone's currently looking for what's next in the better-for-you space. Lagunitas and Sierra Nevada have already announced they're going to be producing a hard tea in 2022. But I ask you, what if the charismatic category leader everyone was looking for was already right in front of you in this very ballroom? Wouldn't you want to invest? I think so. Thank you, and good luck to the other finalists.
All right. Veronica, I felt like we got a little bit more of an ethereal feel to this presentation and to Charisma as a brand. Does that play to the larger opportunity? Does that play to the broad opportunity that Tommy was talking about?
I definitely think it does. I mean, we are all sitting here in this room knowing you, knowing what you've done in the beer business, but by looking at the brand, it seems like you're also trying to get to a customer that might not be a beer drinker. You are using your own tap rooms, which I am curious if there's a plan to get to that non-beer drinker truly. I didn't mean to say truly, but to get their feedback specifically on future flavors.
We good? Yeah. I think the biggest thing, and one of the takeaways that I wanted to push today was, we know in the Better For You space that there's a lot of challenges to go to on-premise because it's a lot of off-premise things. But what we've found with the teas is that they're incredibly on-premise friendly, and that's something that I think that isn't easily seen in a slideshow in a 4-minute presentation. I think there's an enormous amount of opportunity, and we've obviously created sampling in our own tasting rooms, but it is stable and it can go into the on-prem world in a way that seltzers and a lot of FMBs can't currently.
Laura, do you agree with that statement? Are you seeing a lot of interest in hard teas at this point?
There are, yes, absolutely. I'm just glad it's not another seltzer because it's just really, really jam-packed in that category. But I love the fact that yours was lightly carbonated. It's got a nice look to it, nice head on it, and so it's a point of difference for sure. And I think that's the route to go.
Thank you. We're really proud of the fact that it is foam positive.
Ryan, I'm sure some questions came up between yesterday and today in hearing this presentation. What are some of the things that you'd want to hear from Tommy that you may not have heard in this presentation?
Yeah, I know you talked yesterday about how scalable it is. I mean, no specialized equipment. You can make it essentially any brewing facility. Is that correct?
That's what we believe. So I guess to answer your question is yes, and the one thing that we haven't been doing at this point is we're not high gravity brewing it. So in terms of, it has an enormous amount of scale at that point. Some of the things that are limiting us, we do not have a deaerated water plant. We do not have the access to pasteurization, although we don't believe we need it. But if we were to partner on a regional level with someone to scale, a lot of those things would be on site and would allow for huge upside.
And Malika, I mean, we saw a bunch of teas in this competition. This is the only one, I believe, in the finals. I should know that, I guess. But for all of the enthusiasm we're seeing in this category, it doesn't seem like everyone's going to win. But does charisma have what it takes to win in that space that's so dominated by a handful of players, namely one player?
You've hit on the question I have, because you're absolutely right. The category is large. It's been completely dominated. There hasn't been a lot of innovation, but there have been a lot of people who've tried, big companies and smaller as well. And I think this proposition hits on all of the boxes. It tastes great. The packaging is great. The attitude and the lifestyle that you're talking about in the presentation today is relevant and connects with the consumer trends we're seeing. The question in my mind is that enough? And what does it truly take to break out of an established category that does seem really ripe for innovation, but we're starting to see the building of a long tail as well?
I think a simple answer is that there's some large craft players, like I said, Lagunitas and Sierra Nevada both, that have already announced they're coming to market with it. That means they're going to take some of the first, bullets. They're going to have to build that. But there's going to be conversations, and as long as you can get your foot in the door and be one of those conversations, I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Outstanding. Well, we are out of time. Thank you so much, Tommy.
Thank you.
Outstanding. Man, it's going to be a tough job for the judges to pick a winner. All 6 finalists did such an amazing job. Once again, round of applause for all of them. And for our judges who really do have a tough job. Thank you so much. Okay, the judges are going to convene, deliberate, and pick a winner. We're going to announce that winner at 3:15 p.m. You want to be here to see it at home. You want to be in front of your computer to watch it. I'm going to turn over the stage now to my colleague, Zoe.
All right. Good luck to everyone in the Pitch Slam. There's a lot of cool stuff coming out of that. So we are going to transition now. As we've heard several times over today and yesterday, hard seltzer is not dead, but it has evolved, and it's shaped in emerging 4th category. And this beyond beer space, as some people call it, is packed with hard teas, lemonades, hard kombucha, an array of RTDs. As Danny Brager said yesterday, nearly half of all BevAlc buyers are currently buying one of these products. But the space is rapidly evolving and growing and morphing past this Beyond Beer label it's been given. And I'd like to welcome some cool panelists up onto the stage that are going to discuss where this space is going and what they've been able to do to make their mark in it. So, without further ado, welcome our panelists. We have Kyle Cook, co-founder and CEO of Loverboy, producing sparkling hard teas and canned cocktails. We have Greg Serrero, co-founder and CEO of June Shine, producing hard kombucha. And we have Wyatt Carter, co-founder of Sun Ice, which has spiked fruit beverages. Hi, guys. All right, how's it going?
Good.
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you.
So excited to talk about all the fun things you guys are doing. I want to kick it off with, as you are creating products for this space, what are you looking at for inspiration? Is there like a white space that you're looking to fill? And I could start with you, Kyle.
Sure. As a total newbie coming into this industry, I really looked to non-alc. It almost seemed like alcohol was like 10, 15 years behind. You know, and I think some of the biggest trends that we're seeing now that I recognized pretty early on is just premiumization and better for you, call outs. So, I think that kind of like first and foremost, when we think about hard tea 3.5 years ago, like someone said earlier, it was essentially Twisted and a couple Twisted knockoffs, these full, they call FMBs full flavor, but it's really full sugar. So just, coming out with something that, picked up on a lot of the trends, but offered something unique and differentiated is kind of the name of the game for us.
I don't really have anything to add to that. It's pretty spot on. I don't need to be redundant.
No, I would say it's a cultural thing, right? For us, it's trying to find a hole and run through it, and I think that where Kyle and I both live in New York City, and it's a good spot for identifying trends because the culture is right in front of your face, and you get to see firsthand. Okay, what's the aftermath of a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, and you can see what's moving the culture and how people are choosing to consume and how that changes. And I think that a lot has changed over the past year and a half when people have been forced to become more adaptive just because of everything. And that's translated into beverage, both from the non-alc side and also the alc side. But because of the alcohol is inherently social, and that entire thing was disrupted. And I think through that, we've seen a lot of really cool insights, and I think that's going to inform the next several years in terms of innovation.
So I just want to remind everybody, if you have any questions for these guys, send a text to our 818-699-0760 phone number, and we can get some of those answered for you. Greg, you've described hard seltzer before as, you've compared it to like a gateway drug into beverages in the segment. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that?
Yeah, gateway drug, I'm sure all of us are familiar with that term. My mom used to always say that about marijuana. But I think the way we think about it is you don't go from beer to hard kombucha to hard tea to RTDs. That's quite a quick jump. And I think that seltzer is a very basic, very approachable, very commoditized format where you can step into that, you can get comfortable with it, and that starts to open up what we're seeing next, which is this fourth category, or better for you, or alternative. And so I think that we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for what seltzer has done.
Yep. I'll add, he says gateway drug. I say, Truly and White Claw is kind of like the new Natty Light, right? I mean, it's, you eventually, some people don't, but sometimes you graduate to 8,000 craft breweries. So
some people don't.
Some people don't. But I think I completely agree. I mean, it's a stepping stone.
Kyle, you are working, you guys have hard teas, that's kind of been a branch off of that hard seltzer segment. What kind of consumers do you think that hard tea brings in? Is it directly those hard seltzer consumers, or is it people outside of that?
So I think our brand kind of from the get-go was trying to address a disconnect in the industry where, it's dominated by men, and meanwhile women make something like 70% of the purchases off premise. So our brand, we launched it on a TV show that's on the #1 network among women. So we just wanted to make sure that first and foremost we're appealing to that consumer and doing it in the most authentic way possible. And I think we're successfully adding incremental sales to the category because our target demo is probably, that Casamigos or Whispering Angel consumer, but because beer products are more readily accessible and convenient, we're able to convert them in the beer aisle of a Whole Foods so they don't have to go get their garnish and their soda water or their corkscrew. And yeah, I think that's what's worked really well for us, is making sure, we're appealing to the Gen Zs, the millennials that are much more health conscious and social conscious than any other generation. And they don't want to be drinking, their dad's beer. They want to be forming their own relationships with cool, hip, better for you brands.
Sounds great to me. Wyatt, Sun Ice is in pretty unique packaging compared to other RTD type beverages. You have a resealable pouch. Why did you decide to stray away from cans and more like slim cans that most people do, that kind of packaging?
Yeah. For us, it was one of those things where it's sort of rare that the market shows you directly what it's looking for, and this goes back to where I happen to live. And when bars were forced to sell their cocktail program to go, this pouch format just by chance became the go-to format. And because everything was outside of a restaurant or a bar, you could see what the reaction was, and you could see